Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Debate Deathmatch episode. What is this? Fucking 6. Okay, brilliant. Today we have Anokay versus Myta. These are two, if I have to give an equivalency, this would be like the gladiators of our community or some of the biggest. It's going to be very, very good debate, and it's relating to the legalization of drugs. So Anokay will be representing the position of pro. So in other words, he is fighting for the legalization of all drugs. And then Myta is going to be arguing against that. We have 3 judges. We've got Captain, we've got Horseradish, and we've got Chief here, who are all going to try and understand, try and judge accordingly and do the best that they can. And at the end, we will have a clear winner or loser subsequently. So we're going to give some opening statements for the debaters to go ahead, introduce themselves, and like...
Can I interject real quick?
Yeah, go for it.
Because I want to prevent us from having a situation that we had with one of the other debates. You originally said decriminalization, which is what I agreed to.
Okay, decriminalization. Okay, so
okay.
There's an important distinction, huge distinction.
Okay, I'm just bad at this. Okay, so Myta, you're okay with that, right?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, okay. So the decriminalization of all drugs, I am too much of an uneducated fool to understand the difference between those two things, but it's okay because at least the debaters and the judges all know what it's about. So again, thank you all for participating. I'm going to be muting the judges once the debaters start their opening statements, where they're going to give us a brief introduction into what it is that they're going to be debating, and obviously who they are and where you can find them, blah, 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 do a bit of shilling, and then we will open the floor for the debate to commence. So I'm going to go ahead and mute you judges. If you need anything from me, just message me in chat or DM me. Okay, so you're all muted now. Nobody can hear you. You can go and come as you please, into the channel, out of the channel. If you're out and we have some lag or some issues, just jump back in and do your own thing. Nobody's worried about it. Right, take it away. So for the position of pro decriminalization of all drugs, Anokay is going to introduce himself, and then we're going to take it over to Myta. So the floor is yours, Anokay.
All right. Hello, guys. I'm Anokay Life, and I'm going to be talking about the decriminalization of drugs and how this is a better way for the country to operate on its drug policy. As we all know, there was a war on drugs on the United States. The war on drugs has led to the biggest incarceration of Americans that has ever happened. And on top of that is led to, in the south of the U.S., the increase in power increase to drug empires, cartels, and other nefarious organizations who have went from basically being a small nuisance into powerful and rich enough organizations that they are now able to have sway over the Latin American economy and the governments themselves, even working with the Mexican, Panamanian, and other like Guatemalan actual governments. A lot of this can be traced back to the war on drugs. Now, drugs can have a lot of benefits, as we know from medication, but street drugs, of which what we're talking about, can also have a lot of consequences, which is why we deemed it to be illegal. That being said, the way of handling things and just throwing criminalization at things that people will do anyway, whether it be porn, masturbation, abortion, anything, has always led into a increase of these activities and an unregulated market that spins out of control, because it is truly hard to control what a person does. But with decriminalization, you can have a pathway to, one, not stigmatizing these drugs and allowing people to seek help and get off of it if your goal is for people to do less drugs. Two, we can get rid of the mass incarceration and putting such a huge burden onto the American prison system and allow these people to have a chance to actually have a life, work, and contribute into society post being rehabilitated. And three, regulations to make these drugs safer. Instead of having harder and harder drugs that are mixed with fentanyl, laced with other types of deadly poisons and drugs, we can instead be able to have cleaner drugs that are safer to use, and we're able to track how they're getting used, where they're getting used, and most importantly, put taxes and heavy economic burdens on these industries in order to fund other instances, such as the police that would be need to counteract any drug crimes, or be able to build facilities to combat addiction. So, that all being said, this is not a case of drugs are the best thing in the world, but that decriminalization of drugs is the best way forward to treating any problem of looking at drugs, whether it be a moral and humanity problem, a criminal problem, or an economic problem. And I hope that through this conversation with Myta, we can come to common ground and see that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Anokay. All right, Myta, over to you. And by the way, guys, give us, if you want to shout your channel out or something, you can go ahead and do that. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Myta TTV. I basically moderate for just about everybody you will find in the politics community at this point. The moral of the story, I don't exist. I'm a debater who comes on and helps people out or stands as opposition against generally most people on Twitch, as I am a liberal. So the people who are on the right don't seem to like me very much, and the people who are on the left don't seem to like me very much. But I will be arguing in opposition of decriminalization of drugs, mainly because drugs in the United States are not very similar to what we see in other places of the world. We don't have a clean drug market, and the drug market in the United States is very heavy handed as a result of the drug trade, which was introduced into the United States, along with more harmful drugs like fentanyl, into entire communities, which we are seeing an outbreak of currently in the United States. And despite the ability for the government to create the same programs that we see in some European countries, the dependency will likely still increase, and we would see an increase in overdoses as well as usage all throughout the United States if we were to decriminalize it. And the price that comes along with that is very problematic, as well as we've seen with the marijuana industry, where we've seen a large spike in the amount of tax revenue and domestic sales being created through the decriminalization and subsequent legalization of marijuana. However, we've seen a short term fall off of that, and we've seen the black market show its hand again throughout the sort of drug trade in the United States. And the problem is that the United States has a very unique situation with the amount of fentanyl and unclean drugs that are being moved across the border, specifically by mostly cartels and other trafficking gangs that are present within the United States. And it would make it very easy through a decriminalization program for the people who elicit these drugs within the United States to be able to reach people who were previous customers before these programs or rehabilitation programs were established, to be able to get unclean drugs within the United States, because obviously the government won't be able to produce drugs that are as safe, or sorry, producing drugs that are more safe and dramatically cut down on the amount of overdoses or the amount of negative side effects that come from using those specific drugs will have a significantly higher cost. And obviously we know that there is a economic issue in the United States, specifically when it comes to people who use drugs. They seem to be of a lower class, so I would have no reason to believe that we could create a long-term sustainable solution to being able to get cheap drugs to people while simultaneously being able to make it safe for the black market, or having the black market's hand being removed from that situation. So when we look at European countries that have implemented decriminalization processes, we have seen the amount of dependency go up throughout all of the countries that have done this, while the amount of overdoses seems to generally go down. But the problem is that you have these established drug trades and drug routes in the United States that come through the southern border, where in these European countries, it is much harder to get these drugs across the ocean, and it definitely damages the profit incentive to be able to get these things through shipping routes, across flights, etc., whereas they just need to be moved across the border in the United States. So I think that there are a lot of uphill battles that come with decriminalization that have unique circumstances in the United States, especially through established shipping routes and trade routes domestically within the United States, as well as local production of things like methamphetamines and fentanyl within the United States that you don't see in these other European countries.
Okay, thank you, debaters. Hopefully, the chat and all of the audience clearly understands both of the debaters' positions. We're going to open the floor, and once again, the chat will have the opportunity to interact with the debaters directly through asking questions relative to the topic that's being discussed. That's by using the direct question. As you can see above, you can do that using channel points or bits. Apart from that, there's trivia as well, which we are going to head it off, and we are going to ask a trivia question in order to understand who is going to start off the debate. So I'm going to go ahead and do a quick trivia. Okay, here we go. So both of the opponents will be given a trivia question, and both of them have the opportunity to answer. Whoever answers it first and correctly will start off first. Okay, so here we go. Which company's slogan is "You're in good hands"?
Allstate?
There you go.
State Farm. Oh.
Anokay, wow, why do you know that? No idea. Okay, so Anokay is going to kick it off, and we are going to open the floor. Again, chat, use your channel points and your bits to interact with the debaters. But apart from that, the floor is yours, boys. Anokay, take it away.
Yeah, so I think that Myta is a smart man here, and he's pointing out a lot of, very important issues. But I think that's not a reason to throw pretty much the book at the entire process that has clearly not been working, because what he is advocating now is an approach to drugs that is criminalizing them, which is where we're already at. And we're having this conversation because that's not working. I'm talking about moving into a policy that we have seen work in Europe. And as he has pointed out, yes, Europe has had different policies in different situations, but we have experts and we have the ability to account for that. We do have a little bit of a unique situation with the border that needs to be addressed, but that's another issue that can be compounded onto the solution that we're talking about. When it comes to decriminalization, this doesn't mean that a straight legalization and that there is no consequences for drugs, more or less that you're not going to go to prison basically for drugs, and that any attempt at rehabilitation for people, because we don't want to throw people in prison, especially since most drug crimes are non-violent crimes, and violent crimes are the ones you want to lock people in and keep them out of the workforce. Non-violent crimes, those are people that can go out to work, go out and do things. So a decriminalization approach allows us to basically stop these people from going into prison, overburdening the taxpayer, overburdening the prison systems, but allows us room to come up with something to actually help combat the issues that he was talking about and clearly laid out. So when it comes to the border problem, well, crack down on people that are selling drugs across the border and bringing them. You can make it it's legal to purchase and consume drugs from like stores such as like weed right now, legal to buy weed in, let's say, like Washington or Colorado or Nevada if you go to a licensed store to do it. But if you're a drug dealer from Mexico that is selling laced fentanyl weed and trying to bring it across the border, you can be still stopped for that. We can decriminalize it on the side of the people that buy it and pretty much make it where, yeah, you're not going to go to jail, and it might be like something like a fine, slap on the wrist, or like, hey, you should, if you are caught doing any type of crime, whether it's violent or non-violent, in the possession of drugs, then you have to go to rehab at that point. And that the rehab is not for the possession of doing drugs, but from the negative effects that could come if you use drugs improperly. On top of all of that, from the decriminalization point of view, we have to look at the personal freedoms of people and the costs and risk of things. Like whenever we're making laws and whenever we're trying to, establish what's right for a society, it's a cost reward benefit. What is the cost of taking these freedoms away, right? Because when you look at it, most drugs are like plants and are harmless if done in their purest forms. The problem came when we basically cut that access off to people for some purity reasons, right? And I don't mean purity of the drugs. I mean purity of like morals of like, oh, no, don't do drugs all of a sudden. And we opened up these black markets. Yeah, the black markets aren't going to go away if we just decriminalize it right now, but it will prevent that gateway of people going to harder and harder drugs because it's mostly about access. If you prevent access to something, people have a more likelihood of going down a rabbit hole if they're going to go buy from the dark web or buy from a dealer, and then the dealer is going to have more incentive to cut and lace things, and then you get addicted to multiple substances. This way, not only are we preserving a little bit of freedoms from not arresting everybody for drug crimes, not only are we saving taxpayers money by not throwing everybody towards the prison system and keeping the economy flowing by allowing rehabilitation and easy access back into the market after rehabilitation, but we're also allowing people the freedom that if you are doing drugs and you are not causing a problem, then there will be no problem levied back at you. This is only with the decriminalization approach, they're not going to know if you're doing fucking drugs and if you're not causing a problem. So for the people that are responsible, no consequences come. For the people that are irresponsible, they have a pathway to rehabilitation and being part of society. And then when it comes to other external factors, we weaken the strength of the cartel on the American people, and we're able to clean things because most of the drug use is about access and is about availability, right? And preventing people, having people have the available choice of going to partake in drugs without the consequences of fearing prison time allows them a way of getting things without exploring and falling deeper into the rabbit hole of like the cartel traps or the drug dealer traps. And more so on all of that, it gives us a lot of wiggle room when it comes to prosecution on two different ends, whether it's the uh, we're allowed to decriminalize it for use, but criminalize it for dealing. So that way we can go after these cartel people that are coming into the border and peddling, drugs this way, which is, I don't think, an approach that I've seen from Portugal and other places. So that allows us to pretty much take care of that disparity that we see in Europe. Anyway, I'll cede my time back to Myta.
Yeah, a lot of things there to address. So the
Yeah,
sort of
sorry.
problem that I have is that we already seen attempts towards these things that you advocate for being done, and they haven't produced the outcomes that I think that anybody would desire in the circumstance. We seen the implementation of Oregon Measure 110 in 2020, and since then, the amount of drug-related overdose deaths has increased by 20%, which is 5% year on year, which is a large amount considering the already previously established drug crisis in the area. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad that you addressed this because synthetic drugs that are hitting the market, specifically synthetic opioids, are the result of a vast majority of the drug deaths. I believe around 70,000 people a year die as a result of fentanyl and other
Fentanyl, yeah.
synthetic laced opiates that are on the current drug market. And the problem with this is the established
What,
drugs that
trank?
people are trying to get are usually name brand drugs that they are prescribed as a result of injuries or other medical conditions. And they try to get these drugs from aftermarket dealers without realizing that they are laced with fentanyl or other synthetic opiates, and they end up overdosing on them. Things like Vicodin, things like Xanax,
Yeah.
etc., are very common. Oxycodone. The drug of choice doesn't necessarily dictate whether or not somebody is using this drug safely or is able to determine this outcome of not overdosing, considering the negative side effects of many of these drugs lead to significantly more degradation of the body rather than just an overdose itself with long-term exposure and use. And we have seen throughout a lot of these places in the United States, I think 37 or 38 different states now have expansive drug rehabilitation programs that were established under the Chapter 5 specialized substance abuse treatment programs, which allowed people to be able to get rehabilitation under their insurance programs, which is another problem in and of itself that I wanted to address. When you don't have an insurance program, you're not able to enlist in these rehabilitation programs. And we know that in the United States, there's a very heavy overlap with people who are in poverty and simultaneously people who use drugs. And this is
Mm-hmm.
why I say when the government programs attempt to step in and try to undermine the black market, you get cleaner drugs that are overall more healthy for some people to use. But the problem is that the black market has a means of being able to both produce and ship these drugs across the border for significantly lower prices than what you would get for domestic production within the United States due to our established labor laws and our minimum wages. So you'll never be able to undermine the black market's prices and their availability by using a means tested drug program that is done by the state. So you end up in a circumstance where you can't undermine the prices and the availability of the black market drug program. In the short term, it does cause a lot of better outcomes for the people who are using the substances. But even now, we have the necessary rehabilitation programs to give responsible drug users the means to be able to either get off drugs or reduce their dependency. But even in other European countries where dependency is rampant, we have seen these rehabilitation programs that are institutionalized cause higher levels of dependency but lower levels of overdoses. And the problem with that is, as I stated before, it's not that people are using more drugs on average or they're overdosing from said drugs. But in the United States, we have laced drugs that are coming across the border. And we have domestic production of things like methamphetamines, heroin, and cocaine, which don't have a necessary, like, typical use application or safe use application as a result of them being synthetic drugs rather than natural drugs like marijuana or mushrooms. I'm not directly opposed to things like mushrooms or marijuana being used or even coca being extracted and being used as some form of synthetic drug. But the problem is when you have these synthetic drugs that are so heavily manufactured, it comes with these horrible side effects that destroy and deteriorate the body. And I would argue that if you're going to say that there should be a decriminalization of all of these drugs, then there should be an acknowledgement of the side effects that will lead these people into an early grave and oust them from society, regardless of if the drug is decriminalized or not.
Okay, Anokay, before you answer that, if you need to take down some notes about where you want to go with this after, because we do have a trivia question to ask the debaters. So, Anokay, you have a minute or two to write down if you need to. Otherwise, we will go and ask the question.
Sorry, I'm opening up my notepad so I can get all that down. The main points.
God, everybody loves trivia. Debaters always love trivia.
I love trivia.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing.
Can we get some Jeopardy music in the background?
Yeah, what is Jeopardy music? What does that sound like?
You know, that do 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 do.
Yeah, you're doing a good enough job. Just continue.
Yeah, there we go. Hey, chat's got it. Chat's on it.
Chat really likes the Jeopardy music. You can set the song up as one of your redemptions. Comes in handy. Yeah, I can, can't I?
Okay, I took down my notes and I'm building counters, but you can do your trivia.
Okay, so here we go. Right, judges. We are going to ask a trivia question to Anokay, considering that he was the one who was supposed to answer now. If he gets it right, then you will give him a point, all three of you. If he gets it wrong or doesn't answer in time, he will have 30 seconds to answer. Then it will go over to Myta, at which point the same rules apply to him. So here we go. A 401k. Oh, no. There's no way I'm asking that one. That one's bullshit. Okay. So, what food manufacturing company headquartered in Battle Creek, Michigan, uses several animal mascots to sell its cereals, such as Newton the Owl, Tony the Tiger, and a rooster named Damn,
Well,
I live in Michigan. This
You're
isn't fair.
not allowed to answer. It was supposed to be
Oh.
Anokay answering. Oh my god. Okay,
You know
here we
what?
go.
Just give it to him.
No. Okay.
it's
No. We'll
let's
go
just
another
wipe
one.
that off.
You
Yeah,
can't,
well,
you can't give
we,
me a question from my state and
no,
expect me to not answer
no.
it.
You're not
He
allowed to
said it
answer
was
this.
for me
Anokay answers. If he gets it wrong or doesn't answer in time, then it goes over to you, Myta. So let's try that again. Okay. So in the horror film Alien, what was the name of the spaceship?
Oh fuck. Yeah, I don't know that.
Okay. Myta?
I have no idea either. I'm gonna be honest.
Okay, so that's neither points for any of them. Brilliant. Let's get back to the debate. Thank you very much, contestants. Take it away. Anokay was responding to Myta.
Yeah. So there's a few things that I just want to counter on, and it's that I think the first and foremost was that we've tried this as Oregon was his claim because of the measure. I believe it was measure 110, correct?
Correct.
Mida? Okay, yeah. Because of measure 110. But something to point out about measure 110 is that while it is relatively a recent addition to Oregon, it hasn't fully actually rolled out yet because part of the measure 110 was that they wanted to expand access to services and resources for getting off a drug dependency and also build up a lot of um, rehab centers and employ a lot of people, which due to circumstances with the pandemic, which really fucked these stats, by the way. They were unable to do the full rollout plan of what would be transitioning to a health oriented they call it the health oriented model of focusing on like harm reduction and treatment for this drug penalty. So I think using Oregon is kind of a little bit bad of an example because while yes they are the first to like fully go into this approach and like announce it and stuff like that, they rolled it out right at the beginning of COVID, and COVID, as we know, is a time where a lot of people were fucking scared, sick, losing their job, just lost everything, very depressed, had nothing else to literally do in their lives, were cramped inside, were dealing with mental illnesses and stuff. But on top of that, we weren't able to expand any infrastructure and people were losing jobs and the economy crashed. So the stats on this are going to be skewed just from one, the COVID side, but two, because we never even got to see the full plan expand out. And it's definitely delayed the slow rollout of these health facilities and expansion of people that are qualified health experts. That like the one of the ideas was that they were going to send health experts with police when dealing with calls and stuff like that. So this has been a very slow rollout because of the bumpy ride that we've had with COVID and this slow rollout. The second thing that I want to address is that Oregon is one state, and unfortunately in the U.S. or maybe fortunately, depending on your political views, well, we have a federal and a state government. So while the state government has a lot of power, there's a lot of things that it doesn't have the right to, and the federal government still has a massive say over drug policy and the way that we approach drugs. So the federal government impeding research when it comes to things like psilocybin or methamphetamine, fentanyl research, and putting so many roadblocks when it comes to expanding the treatment of these options and exploring and looking into these drugs in any meaningful way prevents a lot of major progress. And because of the no tolerance approach of the federal government when it comes to all of these laws, it puts a lot of stress on the back of people in Oregon to the point where like you still aren't fully safe in Oregon if you are on drugs. You can be relatively safe feeling that the federal government isn't going to come in and like destroy your life, but your access to a lot of um, federal safety nets, federal jobs, federal services, or like moving states and being charged with a federal crime if anything bad happens is limited, right? Limited on the side of jobs and access to resources from the federal government, and then also your chance of getting arrested or federally charged for anything is heavily increased if you ever leave Oregon or anything really fucking hits the wall. And the idea of the resources already being here when talking about Oregon is also, I think, a little bit of a misnomer. Again, for the reasons I mentioned, but also because again, we are states surrounded by a lot of states. And while Oregon is trying to roll out things, we have problems from every other state rolling into Oregon as well. So if we're going to approach decriminalization of these drugs and go into a health-oriented model, we're going to need a lot of the neighbors, such as Washington, California, Idaho, and a lot of people to also experiment with this and start reaching out on a federal level as well to get some of these results, because that's a major difference. It was like when we're looking at where it's been successful, it's been countries that are able to pass this as a countrywide initiative, not a just a statewide, and we're actually able to get like a full-on resources needed in order for this transition, or at least to even get the study. So I would say that saying it doesn't work because of this is highly flawed, because of all the bad data we have on this, because of all the circumstances that have rolled out the last 4 years. I would also like to say that the increased dependency is a good point on your hand, Myta, and I will concede that that is a problem that has come out of like Portugal and Europe in general, and that's a root cause issue that we're still trying to figure out how to address. But I would like to counter that again by saying, what is the alternative? Is the alternative to have people in fear and that they're going to be arrested and hang out with wrong crowds, to get thrown into jail where they're going to ruin their life, never be able to reintegrate, fall into worse crowds, or to seek these drugs into places where, again, as you have mentioned, they're going to get synthetic, mixed, laced things that are going to be worse. So I'm not saying there's no harms to decriminalization, but I'm saying, what is another humane alternative? When the alternative is throwing people in prison and addressing things in a way that has progressively led to power vacuums in the drug market and has led to the ever decreasing health and public safety of our people. At least with decriminalization, we can see the numbers of people dying at least stop. And we can at least see the number of people going to jail for nonviolent crimes decrease. And at least it gives us a lot of room to work on improving that system and being harsher where we need and more lenient where we need, instead of just being harsh and fearing that if you're addicted to something, that feeling instead that you're not going to get help and get thrown in jail, that there might actually be a way back and that your community is actually looking out for you. So whenever looking at anything in regards of the negatives, I just ask people, well, what's the alternative? Because it doesn't seem to be working out on any level. And I can see my time there.
All right, yeah. So I got a couple things written down. So I would like to address the first. Well, one of the claims was that the studies are massively skewed against time, especially during the COVID-19 years, which I will say is a valid claim. But one of the problems that I have with it is that the Chapter 5 specialized substance abuse programs were set up in 2008, and they began their studies then. And the Chapter 12 substance abuse and treatment prevention programs were established in 2012 under the Obama presidency. And the problem is that even in countries where we've seen the decriminalization programs uh, implemented and we've seen them being used in action, the problem is that we know that the amount of dependency does go up, but the amount of addiction and overdoses goes down, which is a good thing. And I would argue that this is leads to people being able to live their lives longer and in a healthier way. But I would say that it relies on the idea that we don't know in regards to how statistics work. We can't account for people who we don't know are either addicted or are dependent on the drugs. So there could be people who are dependent or addicted on drugs who come out as a result of the decriminalization of drugs, which will artificially inflate statistics, and I will concede that. But the problem is that we don't necessarily know what percentage of people hear about the decriminalization or the legalization of drugs and sort of give in to their otherwise desires to want to try these drugs and end up as people who are dependents or addicts otherwise. And as a result of that, I think that when you talk about federal versus state programs, obviously we live in the United States. We have another very unique circumstance where we have each independent state sort of acting like their own independent countries, and what we would see in places like the European Union or other places in Europe. And I don't think that it would be easy to get people on board, especially considering we need a two-thirds majority in the Senate and in the House to be able to pass legislation that would allow the legalization of drugs within the United States. And all we can hope for right now is state funded programs that allow people to get the resources that they need, even if the people aren't using said resources to the extent that they should. We are seeing places in many states that have extensive drug rehabilitation programs under both Chapter 5 and Chapter 12 that allow people to come forward without any form of consequence to be able to go into these rehabilitation programs to get clean. The problem is many people don't actually want to get clean when they're on certain drugs. They want to continue to have dependency on these drugs, but they don't want to be addicts. They still want to be functioning members of society. They just want to be able to get their fix. And this is where I think that the sort of the rehabilitation programs that we have fall short. And I don't know necessarily how we would sort of fix this problem. And I would say that I've not looked into it enough to know how we would fix the drug problem right now. But I would say that we shouldn't rely on federal or state expenditures in terms of drug programs that have shown short term success but long term failures. I think that having a circumstance where we reduce the amount of overdoses and the amount of deaths related to drugs as well as the amount of addicts is a good thing, but I think that drastically increasing dependency by, in some cases, 20 to 30% is absolutely a bad thing. Because if we have a society that is dependent on drugs, we now have to have a circumstance where we have a mass production of drugs to combat an otherwise established black market, which can push out these unsafe drugs for far cheaper, which makes it more available for poorer people who we know are more prone to using drugs, as well as we have a government that is now benefiting from the people being potentially addicted or dependent on the drugs as well. I think that one of the propositions that I make is an alternative form of education that educates people on the damages that drugs have both on the brain and on the body, because there is a lot of propaganda that goes both in favor of one direction and another, both pro and anti drug, that is deceitful and dishonest at best. And I think that it'd be interesting to sort of get the truth of the matter being told to people so that way they can better understand how it will affect both their economic circumstances, their social circumstances, and their life expectancy when they choose to be on these drugs, as well as how they take them. And we've seen these steep fall offs in how drug programs in the United States have worked as well. And I think that this is as a result of both the culture of the United States and as well as the availability of drugs in the United States. When we implement these things, everybody wants to pat themselves on the back and they want to feel good and say that they did something. But a vast majority of the things that are being implemented, as you said before, are actually half measures. They don't actually cover any long term circumstances, or they don't cover any long term solutions for people who are on drugs or who are addicted to drugs. Neither dependents nor addicts have relatively good outcomes when they get enlisted in these programs, other than it reduces the amount of overdoses that we see on average. And the sort of issue that I have with this is just reducing the amount of overdoses doesn't necessarily dictate a good outcome, because someone overdoses on drugs and dies. Yes, I would argue them living a longer life and being able to have a more sustainable means of having their dependency is good. But when you have a dependency on a drug like methamphetamines or cocaine or fentanyl, you're just sort of prolonging the inevitable. Whether or not someone ODs tomorrow or 3 years from now doesn't really matter. I wouldn't dictate that to be a success. I would say that the more optimal strategy would be to try to reduce the amount of drugs that this person consumes or the frequency at which they consume the drug, which the states often, when implementing these drug programs, don't do. They aim to provide people with what they consider to be a safe amount of drugs to each other and the people around them. And as a result of that, it increases dependency, as I stated before. But the long term reality is many of the synthetic drugs that people are addicted to end up killing them, anyways.
All right, is it my turn? Sorry.
Yes, yeah, no problem. Sorry, go ahead.
I didn't know if you were just taking a pause because you had to like take a breath or something. So I
Oh
didn't
no,
want to
I'm
cut
just
you
drinking
off.
my water.
Alrighty. Yeah. So a lot of these are good points, but I would like to kind of bring up the idea of like maybe it's not that you don't like the idea of discriminalization, you just don't like the way that it's being done right now. Wouldn't it be possible to decriminalize and move it from, instead of oh, let's just understand and do harm reduction, to decriminalize with the goal of weaning people off of it? If like, okay, yeah, mandatory rehabilitation, right, instead of criminalization and going to prison, right? Mandatory, like, okay, if you're caught in possession of drugs or something like that, instead of going to like prison or being like fined a massive amount, you just go to a rehab center for a period of time until they clear that, you're less dependent on these drugs and that you have to check in and stuff like this. This is still a facet of decriminalization that people in other states like Washington have talked about. I mean, I'm a pretty free guy, a freedom guy, and I think that you should be free to do some drugs, but like other drugs, I can understand the need of winning people off of, such as meth. But I still think that criminalizing meth to the point of on the consumer side is a fruitless endeavor that you still haven't addressed of how that system at the moment is doing better. It seems that we both agree that from the way that criminalization is being handled at this moment is not working, and where we disagree is the direction that decriminalization has gone. So I want to offer the idea that decriminalization could be more than what Europe and has made it and what Oregon has currently made it, and be something that leads into getting people who desperately need to get off of these drugs off of these drugs.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'm not necessarily opposed to a system where if somebody is on a drug, that we avoid the sort of penal justice system and we go directly to rehabilitation. I am all in favor of rehabilitative justice. The only problem that I have with this is when we look at how prisons are sort of run, it is basically a system of punishment, right? We take
Yeah.
someone that we believe is doing something bad and we sort of give them the adult version of a timeout. We put them under harsh conditions and we segregate them from society. Using
Hmm.
forced rehabilitation for people who commit drug crimes is no different in this circumstance. And I
It is
think that,
different. Do you mind if I point out something
yeah,
of
go
how it's
for it.
different real quick? Sorry. It is different because with the mass incarceration in the U.S., it comes with that going onto your record. It comes with you being in jail with not just people that are also of non-violent drug crime or violent drug crime, but people who are rapists, murderers, in gangs. And the way that the U.S. prison system is built up is not for rehabilitation, but basically for reincarceration. Is that people are highly likely that even if they get out, they're going to get back in. While they're in, they end up in gangs, producing more drugs, getting addicted to some type of substance because of the inhumane conditions. When we're looking at a forced rehabilitation, yes, it is forced in that you have to go and you have to do it, but it's a lot more humane and a lot more effective in the way of, one, it's less the social stigma. Two, it's not something that goes permanently on your record where it will ruin your job opportunities for the future. And three, it's a more humane type of living where you actually, get nice kitchens, get to sleep, get to go home, see your family. You're not fucking like chained inside there unless if like, you're like mentally like completely gone, right? It's something where, you check in, you get taken care of, you have your people. Maybe you do stay there and live there, but it would be more akin to like a hotel room rather than a jail cell. So the implication between rehabilitation and the jail, I feel, is different enough for sure.
Okay, so yeah, like there are some things that
Shalom,
you said
shalom.
there that are a little bit problematic. And that is because like when you in certain states in the United States, they don't acknowledge, well, it seems like they don't acknowledge HIPAA, or the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, which is supposed to create some form of privacy or confidentiality between an individual and the doctor or medical care officials who oversee them. And the problem
Hmm.
with this is in certain states of the United States and in certain parts of the United States, even in like certain cities, towns, etc., there is a precedent that is set where if you go to a drug rehabilitation program, that is set onto your record. And this was, I think, implemented originally somewhere in like the 1970s or 1980s. And as a result of that, we had the ADA, or the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, where it talked about, or sorry, it didn't talk about, where it established a law that says that employers are not allowed to discriminate against people who are recovering alcoholics or drug users. And this was as a result of going to drug rehabilitation programs being on an individual's record. So there would need to be multiple laws that would need to be changed, and there would need to be concessions made to both HIPAA and state laws, which would overwrite current constitutional law in some states, that would make it where they would need to no longer keep record of people who go to drug rehabilitation programs. And then simultaneously, you were going to have to fight issues with the Americans with Disability Acts of 1990 to have some overriding of that law, where employers are not allowed to discriminate against people who are recovering alcoholics or drug users, because it would invalidate this law and it would need to be ratified as well. I think it seems like a lot of legal paperwork to do just a single advocacy in this specific scenario that would potentially take years, if not decades, to be able to solve.
Yeah, I mean, I can agree with that, but it sounds like we need massive reform either way. All right, because the criminal system that you're talking about would require, I feel like, 10 times more to get us to a spot where sending people to jail for drug crimes would equal less drug crimes, and them coming out and being able to reintegrate with society. So I think the rehabilitation is actually, because of the way that the world is going, and young people are more accepting of these, and we're the fucking future, and the people that did the war on drugs are slowly dying and leaving office. I think that we can actually see these massive reforms that you're talking about and changes. And even if we can't get it federally at the moment, I think that statewide we can at least start there, and that's a good place to start with, because we're not going to have all the answers, and it's not going to be solved tonight. It's not going to be solved in a year, but we need a direction to go with, and one that we can see short-term success and long-term success. And I think that massively reworking the rehabilitation is the angle. Just one, again, from the moral perspective and the morality of it, but also from the data point of view of it, and the way of, like, it's everything else is clearly not working, and we're gonna have to redo something. At least with the rehabilitation, we're treating it as a health crisis, which it is, and have a lot more tools to work with than just throwing people in prison. And that's my whole point here. Not that it's a perfect system, but it's a system that could be worked with. So
Sure. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So as an advocate, right? Like, as somebody that's like, yeah, I'm on the train of rehabilitation and I want to have this conversation, you can open up the conversation and be like, I am for rehabilitation and I want these things, but this is what has to be done through rehabilitation to get it to work. And those are the conversations we need to make this work, is people like you.
Okay, so I'm not against the idea of rehabilitation, as I stated before. I just think that
Yeah.
using rehabilitation as an alternative to the penal system for people who commit drug related crimes or who are in possession of drugs, it seems like it's just substituting one aggressive system for another. When you talked about having a stain on your record in forms of going to prison or going to jail for a drug related crime, I have just stated to you and shown you that in the United States, or at least some parts of the United States, you still go to a rehabilitation system which puts a stain on your permanent record, which can still be as problematic to specific states as it is, or can still be just as problematic in some specific states. Now, I understand that this would obviously be undone under the sort of system that you advocate for, but I think that that just isn't the reality right now, and it's not really in the cards. But I was wondering, based on your proposition of using rehabilitative justice specifically for people who commit drug related crimes, we seem to have walked around this, and I don't know how we did it to this point, but what would the consequences be of someone who was convicted of a drug related crime, going to rehabilitation, and then dropping out of or refusing rehabilitation? What would the consequences of that be?
So if, can we start with the crime first, like, just so I can paint
Sure,
a full, like, A to B picture here?
go for it.
So let's say, let's make it non-violent. Like, they stole a purse for money to buy drugs, right? That's pretty common, right? I think that's a
Isn't burglary
realistic
a
setting.
violent crime?
It's not considered a violent crime if nobody is being, like, taken from. So, like, if you took a purse off of a like table and you didn't, like, rip it off of the woman, it's not a violent crime. Or if you, like,
Okay, so I just wanted to be clear about.
if you just like smash a window, I also think, at least in my state, that's not considered a violent crime either if somebody's not an occupant of the car.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let's just start with a non-violent, because I think a violent crime it adds an extra layer that we can get into later. But so non-violent, you steal money in order to buy drugs, right? And then we're saying that, all right, you're told go to rehabilitation, and then they just don't go to rehabilitation.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay. I just want to make sure we're talking about the same
Well, so
scenario.
yeah, like it could be two
Yeah.
scenarios. It could be the person was issued to go to rehabilitation as an alternative to jail or prison time and they don't go,
Mm-hmm.
or B, they fail out of rehabilitation as a result of something like sneaking in drugs, drug usage,
Mm-hmm.
etc., or just refusing the rehabilitation programs. What would the sort of consequence of that action be?
Yeah. So there's gonna be two ways of approaching this. I think is that the people that think that since it's non-violent, that you basically can't force them, like by fucking by gunpoint or like by threat of like prison or anything, and that basically it's like you tried, but since it's non-violent, you really shouldn't like ruin their lifestyle or something like that. Or there's other people like me who thinks that, well, you committed a crime and drugs were involved as part of the crime. I think that if you do not go this, you should go to jail, but not based off of trumped up charges that are because they'll add on the drug charges typically, right, to put you in jail, but for the crime that you committed or whatever crime you committed, you should get punishment for that, right? So it's like, okay, you stole the money, right? And you get offered, hey, you can go to rehabilitation, get off of the drug reliance, and we can get you on your way, and you will have all these connections from the rehabilitation place, and you can like, start your life. But if not, you're going to go to court and get charged for the crime you committed, right? But the drug part just doesn't get added into the crime report. So you don't add on drug time. It's just the crime that you committed.
Okay.
That's my personal belief. Everybody has a little bit of different, but that's the one I heard that answers the question the best. That I agree with, where I'm like, that's a good starting place to
So
work with.
it seems like, yeah, and it seems like some level of accountability is being taken away there. Pardon my disposition. But
Mhm.
it seems like you're arguing that you can't force someone into something that they don't want to do, and that you want to avoid a criminal justice system as we currently have it established to stop them from doing said thing. So it seems like there's some level of accountability that is being taken away from drug users here. And if you ought not force people into the current penal system or the criminal justice system as it is, and you want to simply give people the means to do so, but not necessarily force them to do so, it wouldn't have them participating in mass the way they would need to be able to get better, and get rid of their either addictions or their dependencies. And as you talked about before, that charges related to drug crimes should not carry increased sentences. And I don't necessarily disagree with this on its face, but there are some problems that I see with this sort of proposition. So
Mhm.
I can give you a hypothetical here, and obviously I'm going to go with one now, and then I'm going to propose another one later, and I just want to see and touch on where you are with that. So if someone takes like LSD or something and they're tripping balls out of their mind and they're running down the street completely naked and yelling like obscenities and racial slurs and they get arrested for this, do you believe that this shouldn't carry a higher sentence or a higher charge than someone who had just done public nudity or had been in violation of a hate speech law for that specific state or that specific country?
Sorry, I'm trying to work that in my mind. Could you repeat one more time a little bit? I'm trying to. Yeah, could you repeat one more time? I'm sorry.
So, sure, you had previously stated that charges for drug related crimes should not be
Yeah.
increased for the drugs under the specific circumstance in regards to the crime.
Hmm.
So, if somebody is on LSD and they are high out of their mind and they're running down the street naked in a public place and they are screaming
Yeah.
racial slurs and obscenities, do you think that there should be an increased charge or increased sentencing for this individual or not?
I think not. I think okay. So I get what you mean about the accountability thing. So I'm gonna throw out kind of a little bit of a more of an explanation of what I kind of meant by the charges and like getting arrested. So what I mean is that if you commit a crime, right? Uh, and let's say you were able to prove that like it was a drug related crime, that for the drug aspect of it, there shouldn't be charges, but pretty much forced rehabilitation. And if you refuse the rehabilitation, then you're just going to get charged for the crime you committed, right? But what you can also say here for you, if you don't like that, you can also be like, okay, the rehabilitation takes the drug crime off of the sentencing, right? Quote unquote, right? And that could be the decriminalization, is that if you go to rehabilitation, then we don't charge you for drug crimes. But if you don't and you're more of an issue, then we just increase the original charge of whatever you were accounted for. Like you get the maximum sentencing instead of a lenient sentencing. So like in the case of like stealing the money for drugs, right? They'd be like, hey, listen, we want you to go to rehabilitation. If you go to rehabilitation, you're going to get a light sentencing on the stealing the money from the purse. If you do not go to rehabilitation, we will do a harder sentencing on the purse, like the maximum. We won't add drug charges, but the sentencing, you clearly aren't apologetic and trying to move away from this taboo thing that you did of stealing the purse. So you're not criminalizing the drugs. You're not punishing the person on the drugs, but you're giving a lighter punishment of, hey, if you're remorseful and actually want help for this problem that made you do something bad, we're willing to give you a lot more leniency and get you in the right places. But if you're not, then we're going to throw the book at you for the crime that you did commit, because drugs aren't a crime in this instance. And I think that's as much middle ground I can give there to that system of what would be fair accountability, but allow enough leniency with drugs and decriminalization to allow the processes that we talked about previously, while still holding the accountability you were talking about. But see, even with me able to come up with that on the spot, it shows how malleable the system is and how customizable it is to work to the needs of a community, as long as we put our minds to it.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, I'm not necessarily against giving leniency on drug-related crimes to people who specifically commit crimes while on drugs if they're willing to go through the necessary rehabilitative programs. The sort of problem I have is I don't necessarily see a reason to not increase like sentencing in this specific scenario if it is a drug related crime, as the drug is probably the reason the crime is being committed. Obviously, things like public indecency or public nudity or hate crimes, if this person previously doesn't have a record and they now have a record as a result of doing these things, we can probably use some level of induction to figure out that it is likely the drugs or the altered mental state that caused them to do this specific thing. And to decentivize them from doing that thing again, I would argue that you ought not just give them the standardized charges, but there should be an additional charge, whether that be the rehabilitation or the standardized charges for the crime committed. This would be an additional charge or an additional time served. So let's say instead of giving them like 10 years in prison or whatever, which I understand is egregious, but we're using a hypothetical here. Instead of giving them 10 years in prison, let's say we gave them like 6 months of drug rehab. And then if they get clean, then they serve their like 6 years in prison or whatever, as opposed to 10 years in prison, they get 6 years and 2 months. I'm not necessarily opposed to this, but it seems like it's an increased charge no matter what. So it seems a bit strange to me to propose like leniency, but rather than giving actual leniency, you're just giving a reduced sentence in the form of a different thing, right? You're substituting the penal criminal justice system for a rehabilitation program that this person is forced to go into. And I wouldn't be opposed to this as an idea, but I think that the sort of the price for defiance against a rehabilitation system in which you are proposing needs to be a harsher sentence in terms of the criminal justice system or the penal system that is already established.
Yeah. And that would just have me roll back to the whole thing of that's what we have been doing in a lot of places. And we just now started moving away from that in recent times. And we just didn't see results, which is why we're talking about other methods. And the method in what I've been talking about isn't something that has been widely used. And why you would keep it from a decriminalized is because if people that have drugs that have not committed a crime, right? So it's just a non-violent, like just caught on possession. This saves these people, right? Where it's like, yeah, you're not going to go to jail for fucking possessing weed, mushrooms, ecstasy, even fucking like a little bit of meth, right? Like that, if you aren't causing a problem and you didn't commit any crime other than owning drugs, then you should be fine. That protects these people with the criminalization method I was talking about, which is why I was trying to use that, is that you want to punish the people that commit crimes and can't control themselves with drugs, and they use their personal freedom of using drugs to impede on the freedom of somebody else to not be fucking bothered by somebody using drugs, right? But this protects also the people who aren't a problem and fucking recreationally use it. I know that it's weird to think of recreational use of meth, but there was a time, you know?
Well, yeah, and I don't necessarily. I just want to be clear and state for the record, I'm
Yeah.
not necessarily. Well, I guess this would. I think I already said this. I already said that I concede that I don't believe that all drugs should be criminalized. That I believe
Yeah.
things like marijuana and mushrooms should be decriminalized because I think they're more natural substances and they are a healthy alternative to manufactured or synthetic drugs. But the sort of problem that I again run into is that there is an issue, it seems, here with how to approach the system, right? And simply because
Yeah.
the established system that we currently have isn't working, and I acknowledge that, and there is something that needs to be done. I don't think that this necessarily means that we need to make drastic overhauls to our systems, but I'm not against necessarily means testing these systems. But again, I can't help but harp back to the European countries that show short term success, but long term failures throughout all of their established drug programs. And I can't help but believe that the United States would be no different, if not worse, simply because of the previously listed problems that are unique to the United States in the drug trade that happens. We had tried the war on drugs, cracking down on drugs, etc. It showed that that didn't work. We had tried rehabilitation programs such as Oregon Measure 110 and the Chapter 5 and Chapter 12 drug assistance programs, and they showed to have very little to no effect. So I just have no reason at this point to believe that it's not related directly to them drugs themselves, but it's actually the culture of drugs within the United States and the sensationalism of it. And I would hate to play this card because this is a dumb card that racists use all the time, but I think it's as a result of a lot of media in the United States that glorifies the use of drugs. I think that it's common within our music. I think that it's common within our movies. I think that it's common throughout all of the United States media. And I think that there needs to be something that's done about that, where rather than glorifying the use of hard drugs, we sort of demonize it to some level. And I think once we establish that, I think there will be less people who are prone to use drugs and less people who end up becoming dependent or addicted to drugs as a whole.
All
Yeah,
right.
there's a lot. Sorry.
Yeah, we're gonna take a little bit of a breather for both of you. You guys go and grab some water or whatever, and then we'll get back to it.
Tell me what to do.
I am the boss here. That is how things work, Anokay. All right. So take a break, guys. Chill out. I'm gonna talk to the judges for a bit, and yeah, I will bring you back in. It could be anywhere between 5 to 10 minutes. Are you okay with that, both of you? Yeah.
Yep, I'm gonna go grab a drink.
All right. Cool.
Same.
See you in a bit.
All right.
Okay. Server mute, server deafen, server mute, server deafen. Okay. Judges. Where are we at? Is everybody here?
Yes.
I've unmuted all of you. We can hear you all.
Let me remove this ball gag. Hang on.
Yeah.
Right.
What are we thinking, guys? How's it looking?
Oh, so much.
It's,
2 sheets.
It's very difficult. Yeah. It's going to be a very difficult one.
Myta's winning.
Okay, so Myta's
Myta
winning.
does seem to be winning, despite the fact that I completely disagree with his position.
Okay.
I think it's pretty even.
1 second. Sorry, man. Sorry, I have to boost you up. Okay. Yeah, try again.
I've had it scored fairly even, but I do have a couple negative points on one side more than the other. But let's save it for the end, maybe.
Yep.
Sure.
That's okay.
Well,
I
and
will say
basically,
this.
same thing as Chief. I was about to say it is pretty goddamn balanced. Like, it is pretty fair. There's been some ups and downs on both sides, but go ahead.
Yeah, and that's reasonable. That's reasonable.
I actually had Anokay up in for majority, 70%, and then the last few points like the last 3 points Myta passed him for me.
Sure. Hey, well, and yeah, for me, Myta was up at the beginning, then Anokay caught back up, and then Myta caught. So again, like I said, but one thing that I have noticed, and I might suggest you holding them to the fire of, is the distinction between decriminalization and legalization, because both of them have kind of flip-flopped on this in regards to what that means. And basically by the end of that, Anokay is literally just defending the case, like he's talking about decriminalization's benefits based on what you can literally do while it's criminalized. Like there already are rehab options instead of taking a criminal case. And then so like, I mean, again, what's the difference meaningfully then? So I don't know. But like you said, it's a great debate. They're both going back and forth, and considering the fact that Anokay was completely unprepared for this and just doing this off the dome.
Yeah, both of them are essentially. Yeah. They're doing phenomenally well. But I wasn't expecting this to be a bad debate. Like we've got two of like one of the most prominent, at least in our community. I don't really know about elsewhere, but yeah, Myta's been around for a hell of a long time. Anokay is very good at articulating himself, and he's very passionate about these things. So what was that again? So you're saying essentially, within decriminalization and making something illegal, you can still have rehabilitation centers while you have decriminalization.
I just dropped it into your chat, the actual, just so you can read it all real quick.
Means a person. No, I was focused on that specific example that you gave me, because if I'm going to premise it to them, I'm going to have to use an example to like articulate myself.
Okay, so specifically what I was talking about is the fact that already during our current criminalized war on drugs, oftentimes you are offered rehabilitation for first-time offenses on drug crimes as an alternative to going to prison or taking an actual criminal charge. And on top of that, they will oftentimes offer you, like, I don't remember what the word is, I can't think of it because I'm frankly baked, but there's where they offset your like, as long as you're a good boy, we won't put you in jail, but if you fuck up, we're going straight to jail next time. There's a
slap on the wrist. Okay, yeah, that's what we call it.
There are already options based on what. So in order for them to be discussing decriminalization, it means removing criminal offenses from the use of or possession of the drugs. They can still take it away from you. That's your punishment.
I don't know if that's exactly accurate, because some states have decriminalized weed where it's still just, if you have a small amount, it's still like a fine. Like it's still like a.
So isn't that lessened criminalization as opposed to decriminalization? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong there. Like, again, I know that sounds semantic, but there's a difference if it's either not criminalized or it's just less criminalized.
If you have a small amount, you have a civil fine, and if you have higher possessions, like it's clear that you're kind of a dealer, then it's still like a criminal penalty. Like both worlds exist simultaneously in decriminalization.
Right, but it's the dealer who is actually the criminalized as opposed to the person in possession.
Sure, but I mean, the topic is decriminalization of drugs.
So fair enough. We're not necessarily decriminalizing the possession. We're decriminalizing, period, full stop.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Good call. Yeah.
Unless they want to get into that distinction, maybe.
Sure. Yeah. Well, exactly. We didn't really have a clear, concise line.
To still punishing, like, I think he was actually in the beginning. He did talk about still like wanting to take a hit out of the cartels and stuff like that. And
yes, he did acknowledge that at the beginning.
Help with that.
Do you guys have any like good questions to ask them, like deep questions? Because obviously we're not dealing with any amateurs here. Like they've been around the block, they know this conversation and this debate and how they stand their ground. Do we have any hard questions to ask them?
Yeah, I thought I heard Myta make a claim, like a strong claim, that legalization cannot undermine the black market. So I'd like to maybe hear some back and forth on that.
Yeah, and some support on that.
Cannot undermine the black market.
Yeah.
Okay.
Another one.
In Myta's intro, also, it sounded like he said that where they try, like, if you do decriminalization, there'll be more dependency usage and ODs. But and then, like, I feel like minutes later, he said that ODs were actually down in Europe where they tried it. So he kind of.
Okay. Well, if Oh shit. Okay. All right. I'm not going to call him out on that one. It's Anokay's obviously position to do that if that's the case. But I will ask him the other one. So the first one was. Sorry, I'm a bit slow with this. You're essentially.
That might have made a strong claim
Yeah.
that legalization cannot undermine the black market.
Legalization. So if in the event that we were to legalize drugs, then that would not undermine the black markets.
Yeah. So that's.
Wait, that's a
I heard and wrote
difficult.
down.
Wait, that's
That was what he was saying.
Okay. All right. Okay. I'll
And
just try and phrase it differently to him. Okay.
There are, yeah, we'll let him unpack it. The other thing that I wanted to say was that he kind of might have sort of mentioned the fact that people were trying to get access to prescription medications that end up being laced because they're buying them from black market. Right.
Everflow, we can't hear you, brother. If you're talking Everflow, we can't hear you.
No.
Okay.
My mic just
Okay.
sends
Yeah.
signal automatically.
All right. Go ahead, Horseradish.
Sorry about that. Yeah. So anyway, like it sounds like it's more like he's attacking big pharma, and then I would actually take that into if decriminalization happens, does he think that because basically they keep talking about decriminalization means you get to regulate it more, and that's more legalization as opposed to decriminalization, is my understanding. So it's like either if you're legalizing for a person to grow weed, then you can say these are the rules for you growing weed. But if you've just decriminalized its use, but it is still criminal to possess and or manufacture, then you're not going to be able to put any sort of meaningful regulations in. And so they kind of both were tap dancing on the regulation to decriminalization versus legalization. And I really like to hear them clarify
I
that.
would push back a little bit on what you just said, which is essentially by legalizing it, you would essentially, that by default would mean that you would have some measures against it. In other words, what you can and can't do. But that can and can't be the situation. In other words, they get to decide whether that's the case or not. And it's not that obvious from the get-go. So that would depend really on what claim Anokay and Myta would make. So it's not that obvious, like, unless Anokay is going to say, okay, like with the legalization or the decriminalization, then that's what this and that means, and then Myta comes back at him, then I don't really think that inserting a specific or an identified definition for a procedure that would happen in the event that you were to decriminalize or make this illegal, I don't really feel that that's the truth, or that's like an obvious or a static answer. In other words, it can happen, like with the legalization of marijuana. They can also say, yeah, but you also have to buy your weed from only this recognized company. Or they could just say there's a bunch of different companies and they all prop up by themselves, considering that it's now legal. That's a different avenue, I feel like.
Fair enough. That's different levels of regulation.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
But still, you've got regulations involved because it's legalized.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
You can't regulate if it's decriminalized. That's all I was getting at. So
you can't regulate it if it's
right, because you're saying you can't do it if it's criminal. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's legal. It's totally legal.
So are you saying in your decriminalized state where you could, in a decriminalized state where, say they have like medical marijuana and they allow you to grow, can't they tell you like how much you could grow? Like there's still regulation.
So that has been legalized at that point. You see what I'm saying? That those are the laws on the books representing the legalized status of that cannabis that you're growing, and these are the criteria for being able to legally grow it. It has been legalized. So as soon as you're putting those kinds of regulatory statutes on it, it has gone past decriminalization and has gone into actual legalization.
I think there's just a lot of gray area there.
You're right. Yes, and like I said, this is what I've been sitting here this entire debate. Double checked my definitions and shit a few different, and it's kind of gray. It's kind of hard to say, so I don't know. But I would just stick with the big pharma take, asking is big pharma the solution, or is big pharma the bad guy? So That's the
I
thing
think
that
when
I
he
would
was
add.
talking about people going for those drugs, he was talking about people selling imitations of those drugs that are
Yes.
laced. Yeah.
That is correct. That is correct. That was what he was getting at. But so once again, it's because of the fact that the people were addicted to the opiates, allegedly, right? According to the studies, that the people get addicted to the opiates by prescription and then find themselves cut off on the prescription because of the regulations on it. And then they have to go out onto the street and try to purchase it from the black market. But the pills that they're getting from the black market are not actually hydrocodone. They're a fucking placebo with a drop of fentanyl, and huzzah, now you're overdosed and die. Like, that's, I think, what the approach they were talking about.
Yeah.
And in that case, was it not Big Pharma who got the people strung out on the drugs in the first place? Was it not the regulation that was put on those drugs that caused the people to have to go to the streets in the first place? Like, the causality and the blame game goes to weird places when it comes to the Big Pharma drugs. That's what I
pretty
was.
weird. That's like saying like, oh, you're in your 40s and you just had your first knee surgery. You should just have to deal with ibuprofen, and if not, then big pharma's the bad guy because with your body chemistry and happen to get addicted. It seems like a weird area.
Sure. But then again, that's if it's being prescribed in a responsible manner, right? Which we know from, I mean, historically, it was not being prescribed in a responsible manner. They've overcompensated now to make it so that people who actually, like, literally what you just described is happening, is my understanding. There's a lot of people, because they're so afraid of people getting fucking strung out on opioids. They're like, sorry, bro, walk it off, rub a little dirt and it'll fuck off. Like, so yeah, that is absolutely a thing. So that's like I said, I would like to hear the debaters hash out where the line of Big Pharma's involvement in this is. I'm not placing a position. I would just like to hear them discuss it more.
I have one more easy one too, which is that Anokay Life was talking about how ending the stigma would be good, and at one of the last points Myta made,
Yes.
sounds like there should be more stigma.
Yeah, that was actually a good thing.
Okay.
I had noticed that as well.
Have we got anything else for me before I bring in the debaters?
Which ones do you have?
I essentially have the ones with, well, the only direct one that I have, which I can contend with, is it will not undermine the black markets by legalizing it. That's the only one of relevance that I see that I can ask.
Number two, and this one, like, again, is the involvement of Big Pharma in the black market versus the both causal and effect of the pharma because Myta had talked about people trying to go to the streets to buy prescription drugs, right?
Okay.
And then that's how the fentanyl gets involved. People go try to buy their hydrocodones because they're cut off, and it turns out to just be a fentanyl pill instead, and that's how they OD and die. And I'm saying that, first of all, the historical prescriptions or unethical, immoral prescribing factors,
you could say,
overprescribing led to a big part of that pandemic. So is Big Pharma involved, or should they be held to account? And more importantly, is Big Pharma going to be the ones who come in to save the day by buying up all the weed companies and making it because that's one of the biggest reasons, the biggest lobby against legalization and decriminalization is Big Pharma. So, because they stand to lose so much money off of it.
Okay, so should Big Pharma be held accountable with the decriminalization,
for the opioid epidemic,
for the
and should they be allowed to lobby against decriminalization?
And should they be allowed to lobby against decriminalization?
Yes,
okay. All right, judges, thank you very much. We're going to bring in the debaters and we're going to head it off. Okay, we've got a lot of questions. All right, you're all muted. Thank you very much. See you in a bit. Okay, debaters. You're back.
Hey,
we can hear you. Okay, so are you both here? Yep. Okay, you're both here. All right, so we've got a couple of questions for you. One question is going to be heading off. You're going to have, this is how we're going to do it. So I'm going to ask you a question, then you're going to engage with it for the next 5 or 10 minutes maximum. Then we're going to do that for the next question after that, and then you've got a third question. So, okay, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So I'm kind of like taking over the debate at this point. So first question is, Myta, at the beginning or your opening statements, you had a very heavy position on when when drugs were to be legalized, that would not undermine the black markets. That would not, essentially. Was that your position, or do you want to repeat
Correct.
it? Yeah. Okay. So do you want to go into a little bit of depth with that for the next 5 or 10 minutes with Anokay and discuss how you have that position and whether that's a logical position to have?
Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so basically the idea is that within the United States, we used to have legalized use of fentanyl within our medical system. It was used as a pain relief system. And it was banned just a couple of years ago within the United States. And when it was banned, the United States had this mass excess amount of fentanyl that it had to get rid of now because the drug was illegal. What we did was we moved it across the border into Mexico. And as a result of that, Mexico then just trafficked it back across the United States as things like fake opiate pills, and it was laced with other things like cocaine, meth, etc. And we seen this mass increase in fentanyl in the United States after it was banned. And I find that interesting because there was actually not really a fentanyl crisis prior to the banning of fentanyl in the United States. But we did see people using a different type of fentanyl in the United States, which was called surfentanyl. Surfentanyl is actually a type of tranquilizer, very similar to ketamine. And people would use it to get high, and it was much less likely to kill people through overdose because it was given in microdoses, very similar to what ketamine is.
So we're
And
talking
as
about
a result-
trank now. That's the...
Yes.
It goes by, okay, trank, all right.
Yeah. So, and when people were given this specific thing, they were highly unlikely to overdose because it existed in such small doses, unless people had the money to buy these doses in mass. And the sort of issue is, as we've seen drugs sort of become more and more criminalized within the United States, I will say that we did see the amount of illegal or illicit drug usage happening illegally go up. And this isn't necessarily a argument against making certain drugs illegal, because I still disagree with the idea of synthetic drugs being legalized within the United States because of the health concerns of long-term use of those drugs, even under dependency and not necessarily addiction. So it's just certainly like prolonging or sort of delaying the inevitable death of the user.
Okay.
Wait, I'm a little confused here, boss, because you just made my points for me.
Well, that's up to
Uh,
the judges. And obviously you can argue against that. So try and articulate that accordingly. So let us know why you feel like that's not a position he should be holding.
Well, the question was why banning and criminalizing like drugs will
Legalizing.
illegalizing.
Making drugs legal, in other words, or would not undermine the black markets, was the question, not criminalizing, which is what okay.
Yeah. So you're saying that legalizing would not, or sorry, fucking, the point is what he just said. All right. Fucking you twist your words, you fucking little sly man. But what Myta is saying here basically is the whole point of my argument, though. He's pointing out an example of how banning drugs and taking away drugs and criminalizing it in the United States literally led to a black market that sold us our own fucking drugs that we produced and laced them with stuff, made people more addicted, killed more people, and led to pretty much a shittier situation than what was previously there of them not being criminalized or illegal, which implies criminalization.
Okay,
So like,
you do realize that that's on the premise of them becoming illegal, the drugs becoming illegal. Sorry, I keep it. But the argument that you guys are arguing is decriminalization. So in other words, just because they become illegal, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't, they become legal, it doesn't mean that you can't criminalize or persecute or challenge the fucking people doing it. In other words, it's like two distinct different things, right? You
Yes,
understand why?
but I'm saying
Both things
that
can
pretty much,
exist simultaneously.
yes, 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 yes.
Okay. So it's not inherently obvious that he's arguing like for your behalf, although you would love that. But no, it's more like essentially he's saying, well, that's okay. I'll let Myta argue it for it. You guys have got another like 5 minutes to go ahead.
Sorry, I'm confused now, Mida, because that actually is like part of the major points I was like talking about, and I think that leads more credence to my idea that the drug straight up just being illegal and criminalized and all this just leads to more problems than the solutions. And so I'm just confused on how it's kind of different than what I've been saying. Sorry.
No, it's good. Boss kind of screwed me there because I was hoping you would respond in that way, and I think that he kind of undermined your argument a little bit, which I was going to do. But like the issue that I have is that as I was going to say when you pushed back against that, because I was definitely setting a little bit of a trap there by
Sorry,
giving you the
Myta.
credence and conceding that point. But I do agree that like we did see a drastic increase in these specific things after the illegalization happened, which allowed the importing of the drugs to be able to come back through the United States and be sold to us at a significantly higher cost than what they were originally being done or being produced for by the Chinese or the Mexicans that were pushing it across the border or importing it to the United States. But as I harped back to before when I talked about this, what we would expect to see and what we actually see in regards to rehabilitation programs within the United States are extremely different. This is why I keep bringing up the examples with certain countries in Europe. In certain countries in Europe, we see dependency go up, but the amount of people who are overdosing and have addiction to drugs going down, which isn't necessarily a bad thing in and of itself because it prolongs the individual's life. But the problem is when we see in the implementation of Section 5, Section 12, and Oregon Measure 110 within the United States, these didn't alleviate much drug dependency. They didn't alleviate much overdoses or addiction at all. And in the circumstance of Oregon Measure 110, we actually seen a 20% increase in drug overdoses. So when we talk about how this is supposed to work and how we use examples all throughout history or even recent history for how drug rehabilitation programs are supposed to work, and then we look at the United States' drug rehabilitation programs, obviously either we're doing something different or as I stated before, the culture around drugs within the United States is drastically different and it is viewed differently by not just society but by the people doing the drugs, and it causes the circumstances or outcomes where people are less likely to get clean or stop using drugs, as we can see found in the data as established by the United States governments, both state and federally.
Okay, that's all good and well, but that's what we have been arguing. What I'm confused about is that you said that you did agree that the decriminalization would, or you believe that, according to what TB said, and you seemingly agreed with him, that um, decriminalizing in the U.S. does not equate to tackling the black market issue. Like, that there would be
Correct.
no change with that. But then you gave a pretty good point, which I believe is in my favor, where you pointed out how the criminalization of drugs and then causing us to get rid of and offloading those drugs bit us in the ass and literally led to more drug use. Not the decriminalization, but the criminalization of it, the illegality of it. If it was
Yes.
decriminalized, we wouldn't have had to offload it into Mexico, and it wouldn't have been sold back to us. You even said that prior to it being criminalized and offloaded to a different country, it actually was seemingly a better situation for those using the drug.
Correct. I don't disagree with this point, but the problem is that it's not as a result of the drug itself. It is as a result of cutting of different drugs. So when we had to offload all of this fentanyl, the United States didn't want to just destroy it because they seen an opportunity to make money off of it. This is why they sold it to cartels in Mexico. And the Chinese still produce the drugs because they could still make money off of it, importing it to Mexico, knowing that the drug cartels in Mexico will cut it with different drugs and then send it across the border, knowing damn well that it's not clean and that people will either become addicted to it or they will overdose on it and die. They obviously have the goal of not having someone overdose and die because that would lose them a customer. But in this specific circumstance, they can get away with finding this new cheap drug to be able to cut their established drugs with to be able to make a larger profit off of the drugs that they sell. And this is what caused the fentanyl outbreak in the United States for the most part. It was the fact that there was this massive amount of drugs that now went available for sale that was easy to import into Mexico, and then it could be cut with other drugs unknowingly and unbeknownst to the individuals who would be buying them, and then trafficked across the border. This doesn't
Yep.
necessarily equate to the drug legalization process itself, but rather the ability to mix and match drugs to be able to create new ones and then sell them at the same prices.
Yes, but that only opened up because of the criminalization of the drug. Like you see, I'm talking about like the root cause here. All started from when we were like, hey, we want to make this illegal, and we want to criminalize it. And well, obviously, we don't want to hold on to it because of that. So they had two options: destroy or sell. Now, obviously, selling bit us in the ass faster. But let's just say we destroyed it. Then what would have happened? Well, they would have just produced it in China and sold to the now void, empty market that still has a need, because taking away drugs doesn't take away the need. It just it decreases where you're going to look, and you're going to look in shadier organizations. And I think that's the whole like point of this the cartels and everything that get propped up, is that we make something illegal, and then because now that it's illegal, the only people are going to fucking sell it are going to be criminals, and the fucking criminals that are selling it obviously do not care about slicing, dicing, mixing, and that's going to create just bigger problems. And you yourself said, like, beforehand, before we even went through all this problem, like, it was fine. Like, Chinese and Mexicans weren't fucking selling laced drugs to us, and it was a better situation for the drug user and those that are around, the society around the drug user, when it was this safer, legal, regulated option. So like that's why I'm like, yeah, that's what I've been saying.
Okay,
this whole time.
Myta, respond briefly, and then we're going to move on to the next question. Okay.
Yeah. So the basic idea is that it just substituted one drug for another, right? Like before, the drug of choice was obviously it was methamphetamines, it was things like cocaine that was very easily made and distributed out of Mexico, and then it switched over to fentanyl when they got this mass increase of cheap fentanyl that they could move across the border. But the problem is that even in the United States, when the ban went into effect, it expired in, I believe, 2023. So we still have we're reestablishing the use of fentanyl in the United States in the medical industry. I can't remember if it was 2020 to 2023 or 2017 to 2020, but we are still seeing the established use of fentanyl and the mass production of fentanyl in the United States now that the ban is over. And Congress seems to have no interest in actually repassing a new fentanyl ban in the United States, simply because the amount that is being trafficked is otherwise problematic. And I think that this might just be me touching a little bit on conspiracy theory. I think that likely the pharmaceutical industries have some means of profiting off of fentanyl being both within the medical field and within the illicit drug trade within the United States as well, because they can both prescribe it to patients as an alternative to certain painkillers, and they can simultaneously know or allow it to be either stolen or redistributed on a black market.
Okay, so this is a lead up into the next question. So the next question is this is addressing big pharma's involvement in the black markets. So overprescribing, should big pharma relating to big pharma overprescribing should be held accountable for the opioid epidemic, and should they be allowed to lobby against decriminalization?
Are you
I'll
asking
let
me
Anokay
or
start. Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
Yeah,
and
go
start.
ahead.
Yeah. So I think they should be held accountable because, as I've pointed out before in earlier statements, I think that there's a difference between decriminalizing for the consumption and criminalization for the dealers, right? Because the dealers are the ones making a profit on destroying fucking people's lives and absolutely like fucking you over, like these illegal dealers. I'm a little bit. I'm open to having registered and licensed dealers for like small, safe, cut amounts, but for these illegal dealers coming in from across country borders, or even states sometimes, and peddling drugs to people that are cut, dirty, in huge amounts, unlicensed, unregulated, like no hand on the wheel here. I think that it's an easy dub to crack down on these people rather than cracking down on the victims of these people, right? So I think that the pharmaceutical companies count as this because of their overprescribing. I don't think that we should blame the victims that got addicted to these opioids, rather the pharmaceutical companies that knew about the addictiveness and still pushed it on to the American people, causing the greatest health crisis in American history. And for the second part of them being able to lobby against decriminalization and stuff like that, I'm gonna say no, and it's not even it doesn't have to do with the fact that I want decriminalization and they would be lobbying against it. It's just that I fucking hate lobbying. Just so it's more of an answer against lobbying rather than for this particular question.
Okay, so Myta, go ahead and respond. Again, you guys have approximately another 7 to 8 minutes, so go ahead.
Yeah, I would say that, yeah, on some level, we should hold like what you would call big pharma accountable. Like, there are doctors who prescribe and overprescribe specific prescription drugs because it is in their best interest to, because they make more money from that and they don't have to actually give a shit about their patients, which is a damn shame because it's happening all throughout our medical system. And we should hold the, obviously, the people who allow these prescriptions to be filled should be held accountable to some extent as well. I'm not necessarily sure how we would do that, but we know that it is possible to track prescriptions from doctors as well as the pharmacies that fulfill them. So I don't think that there would necessarily be too big of a an issue being able to find some level of accountability there. But I think that the larger issue is, even with these drugs criminalized and being able to not get them legally through any means, in the United States, we are still seeing fake drugs all throughout the United States. And we are actually going through an epidemic right now that started just a couple months ago, where we are seeing the FDA pushing out warnings about counterfeit drugs like semaglutide, such as, but not limited to, Ozempic and other weight loss drugs that have actually found their way into the United States drug chain as a result of incompetency and not properly checking the sources that you are buying the drugs from. And as of right now, we are seeing mass recalls because there are believed to be like millions of products of semaglutides that are actually tainted because they are counterfeit drugs that are not safe to be used right now in our current supply chain. So even under a system where these drugs are heavily looked over and regulated, we are seeing fake drugs and cut drugs being found in our current big pharma, as you would call it, supply chains. And I have no reason to believe that if we decriminalize these drugs or found a way to make them more legal in our current system, that it wouldn't necessarily be the same way. And I think that it would be even worse because the amount of illegal drugs, or sorry, not illegal drugs, the amount of counterfeit drugs that would be in the system would be even worse, because the decriminalization of drugs would allow people to be in possession or to make their own, and then they would be able to sell to reputable dealers in the same way that they are currently doing from out of country dealers that are finding their way into the official system.
I want to push back on this because I think that we're comparing apples to oranges here. Yeah, they're both fucking, fruit. I mean, yeah, they grow on trees and shit, but there's completely different scenarios and setup and cause and effect from this. The Ozempic is not a drug that you get high off of and you're taking for pleasure. It's a drug that treats diabetes and can be used for weight loss. And the whole supply and demand issue has to do with the fucking shitty IP laws in the United States and a lot of trademarking of drugs and horrible production lines, and basically just our healthcare being a fucking racket scheme held up by monopolies. And it is a necessary drug to treat people for a real fucking condition, and this is people getting desperate and buying and what they fucking need. You need these fucking drugs. Diabetics need this shit, so it's a necessity. It's kind of like fucking buying insulin. You don't really have too much of a choice, maybe for the people that are trying to use it just to lose weight, but the people that are prescribed it for losing weight are people that are like, they're severely life altering effects with their weight when which is why they're getting prescribed Ozempic. So this is a different situation than somebody who is addicted to a substance, whether it be opioids overprescribed by a doctor or it's just recreational use of something like LSD. So I think that we're not being fair with the application of like why people would go to these, and then because and how these get into the distribution line, and then what would be the approach of dealing with this, because the approach for the Ozempic would be to pretty much break up monopolies, lift up, allow the mass production of this, be able to buy from Canada and other producers that are producing a shit ton of this for a lot lower of a cost, which is not in turn like, good for the American pharmacies, but it's good for the American people, versus a situation of getting addicted and having a reliance on an addiction because of recreational use and just liking to fucking use the shit. And that being something that could be non-violent or violent. And, it goes into a whole different like spin house. So I don't think we're comparing. It's not a fair comparison, I think.
Yeah, I think that it's not an entirely analogous or fair comparison, and I will give you that, but I think the problems that exist are exactly the same. And I think that when you talked about how like the current like drug system that we have in the United States through like what we would call big pharma is a racketeering scheme that is held up by monopolies isn't necessarily false. I would tend to agree with this, and I think that there should be something about that done about the highly privatization of drugs and medical care within the United States. But I think that you touched on my point a little bit there, and unfortunately, you talked about how the desperation leads to people buying counterfeit drugs. And I think that this would only be more problematic under a system where we decriminalize drugs, because as we know, with the decriminalization of drugs, when the government takes over these established systems, they can't afford to produce the drugs at the same low cost the black market can, and distribution of these drugs is significantly easier. And the unfortunate part about this is when we talk about the systems of decriminalization, dependency is actually more rampant under decriminalization, even if the amount of overdoses in the European countries, as I stated before, goes down. So when we're talking about dependency and we're talking about poverty within the United States, it's a very, very large overlap where people are more likely to end up dependent on these drugs that they end up trying because of decriminalization. And then they end up with counterfeit drugs or otherwise leading down the road of dependency where they end up overdosing or having some other problem. And as we know in the United States, as I talked about with Oregon Measure 110 before, we've seen a 20% increase in drug overdoses as a result of that. And this is why I say it's a very slippery slope in the United States, because we can't reflect on the European countries' models to be able to see how their results went when we attempt the same things in the United States and we get very different and drastic results.
And I have multiple times pointed out that the results are a bit skewed for recent data and also a little bit more complicated because of the setup we are. But we both agree that we're not fucking Europe, and we can do things differently than Europe. There's a lot of things that have not been tried, a lot of methods that aren't being researched because of federal roadblocks to even researching this. And while we don't need to federally decriminalize drugs completely in order to achieve states being able to investigate a lot of this stuff, we do need the federal scheduling of drugs to be drastically changed, and we need to change the way that we're allowed to operate when it comes to research, development, and operation of drugs in the United States in order to achieve this. So I think that when we're looking at the system, you see the European system as this flawed system that has only achieved, little victories, but still long-term struggles. And I think that's fair, but at least points us into a direction of where to start, but allows us to learn from where they failed and be able to do things in a uniquely American way and try things that they have not tried, because this is still a relatively new field of operations and we have not explored everything. Why stop mining when we know that there's gold to be found, right? Like, just because we haven't hit it yet doesn't mean that it's not fucking there when we see signs of improvement, but also know where like there's signs of, okay, this isn't improving in this area, so let's try a new approach here. And we've both agreed that there is ways of changing the system to at least be a lot better than where it is now, which means there's room there. There's opportunity to grow and to change. And again, with Oregon and all these other examples of in-state that we've mentioned, there's been a lot of things contesting it. A lot of I know that I brought up the COVID times and you brought up 2008 and the start of like the Obama era policies, but a lot of those policies were met with being deadlocked by federal laws and being able to not appropriate the right amount of research funds and access that they need in order to test and get a lot of experiments needed to combat the reliance on drugs and use drugs in a more appropriate way when combating addiction and finding ways through addiction. So there's a lot left to be undiscovered. I think that stopping now, when we've literally just hit the surface, is like turning back the boats when you just discovered a new fucking continent, bro. Like, it's like, bro, there's so much fucking more out there. We can literally see it out there. Let's keep on going, you know? And that's
Okay,
the wait, one more thing is I just want to say
no
the
problem.
beauty about the American system and about the state systems is that we have 50 states that could try 50 different solutions, and we have people that can vote in, and we have direct democracy on local levels typically, right? Where you're able to vote in initiatives and changes, and if things aren't working, we can steer the ship. This isn't a thing where we're just helpless to bigger forces. We literally can put our foot or our vote there, pretty much put our foot into the race and actually make these changes. So I say, instead of focus on what's not been working, and instead of saying, hey, there's been a lot of setbacks with what we have been doing, how about we look at the positives and look at the potential and start moving in that direction instead of fighting against it. Instead, I say, Myta, instead of being an advocate against, or instead of advocating against the decriminalization, advocate for decriminalization being what you want it to be. And past that, I don't have too much other to say about this, so
Okay,
I'll let that be my
Myta.
closing.
Yeah, Myta, quick response for this, and then we've got another question. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I would say that the proposition that he has, it feels a little bit optimistic and a little bit utopian to me, because I think we both agree that the corporatist structure of the United States is established by monopolies, and that as a result of big pharma in the United States having so many people lobbying behind them, especially within our political system, it seems a bit strange to try to undermine like them to the extent than what he is advocating for. And I tend to be more nihilistic when I look at how these systems work and try to work within them, where it seems to be he's a little bit more
Or
optimistic
give
in
me a
that
second.
regard. But
Keep going.
like yeah, like I think that the position that we should legalize, or sorry, decriminalize all drugs in this specific circumstance seems to have nothing but negative outcomes. And if we don't decide to follow any established model and we begin experimentation, I think that while we could find a solution that potentially leads to less drug dependency and less drug overdoses, we don't necessarily ensure that outcome. And I think that that's a big problem, because in the United States, when we've seen these decriminalization attempts, they've led to worse outcomes rather than better outcomes. And the ones that we have implemented haven't necessarily followed the previously established policy positions of Europe either. So, as I say before, I want to loop back into my previous claim that it seems to be the culture around drugs in the United States that isn't taken as seriously as it is in other places. And as a result of that, we don't necessarily get the results that we want. And I don't think that there's anything that will necessarily change that for any meaningful way, due to the fact that we have a lot of unique circumstances that we've touched on before. And I think that it's sort of one of those problems. It's going to remain a problem regardless of the laws or the implementation of decriminalization that are passed within the United States.
Okay, now we are going to ask a quick trivia question. Okay, so Myta is going to have the opportunity, considering that Anokay went last, if I'm not mistaken. And then again, judges, depending on who gets the answer correct, or yeah, you know the deal. Okay, so here we go. What was the first live action Disney remake to get a PG-13 rating?
Star Wars?
Yeah. Anokay?
I don't think he's here.
Oh shit, is he not here? Fuck. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I didn't hear him. Did he leave?
He said that he'd be right back.
Okay. All right. We'll give him a chance to get back. All right. How's it going, by the way, Myta? How you feeling, bro? You feeling confident? Tell us.
Yeah, I'm feeling good.
Easy W in the bag, right?
I think for the most part, maybe.
Yep. All right.
I don't know, if I was leaning more towards a scorecard, I would say it's either going to be 1 point or 2 points in favor of one opponent or another, or it's going to be a draw.
Do you think it's close?
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
it's
a lot
fair.
of people
I think
that.
depending how the judges feel about my position or Anokay's position,
Yeah.
I think they're probably going to let like some level of personal bias
Yeah.
determine their outcomes,
That's
and
good.
that's perfectly fine. And I don't have any issue with that. But I'm very happy with my performance overall and my opponent's performance.
Yeah, fair enough, man. I haven't really heard anything opposite to that or to the contrary of that. Let me just say. So yeah. Because both of you are pretty like knowledgeable in general, and like obviously you've done debates before or like moderated or whatever, so you both are experienced, and so we weren't expecting an easy fight. But I will say one thing, judges, don't know how you're doing it. I definitely couldn't do what you're doing. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. Here we go. Okay, done. All right, Nespar, I've noted it. Okay, don't worry about it, guys. So we've got a bunch of different questions. Stop egging us on. Bro, I have no involvement in the matter. I matter very little. My opinion means fuck all when it comes to this. I'm about as valuable when it comes to my criticisms or opinions of judges and debaters as, I don't know, something irrelevant. Can't think of an analogous thing. Yeah, I got your question, Nespar. No worries. -1 point for pre-rationalizing a potential L.
Sorry, I'm back.
Okay, what's up? Okay, so here's the
about that.
question. Here's the question. Wait, now I need to... Okay. Anokay, what was the first live-action Disney remake to get a PG-13 rating?
Live action remake to get a PG-13 rating.
Yes, by Disney.
I'm gonna say Jungle Book.
Okay, there you go, judges. Wrong answers on both behalf. Both of these guys don't watch enough Disney, apparently. Now, we have a question from Lanius. All right, don't know if he's still in chat, but here we go. Are we decriminalizing both the use and the sale of drugs? That's the first question I can imagine, which then goes into a further question. Should cities have licensed crack dealers? And then, are we implementing regulations on establishing meth labs? So I think this is an all-in-one question.
Yeah. So there's a lot of models, right? And I'm here to basically say, like, we can choose any of the models. Personally, I'm of the belief that you should decriminalize the purchasing and use of the drugs, but criminalize the mass sale of the highest scheduled narcotics, but uh, um, not for the lower scaled narcotics. So this is a little bit of a sliding scale for me. As everything, I have mixed politics, but there's going to be a lot of people that say just decriminalize like everything completely, both sell and purchase. All right, if you buy drugs, you're not gonna fucking get in trouble for buying and using the drugs. But you'll get in trouble if you're like a drug dealer, fucking peddling meth or bringing it meth or operating meth labs or bringing it from other countries and stuff like that. But for like acid, LSD, and lower forms of other drugs, right? That you can have like a registered shop, such as we do with weed shops, and licensed with the government. And then when it comes to decriminalizing for like treatment, this is another big thing, is that if you decriminalize, you can use these drugs for treatment. So it allows the moderate purchasing or sale, creation and sale to, let's say, rehabilitation, because a lot of people don't know this, but you can't just cut somebody off from drugs. You got to wing them off, lower and lower doses. So, you're going to have to produce the clean shit. So you're going to have someone to make it and sell it to these rehabilitation places that will, wing people off. Because if you just straight cut them off, it could literally kill them.
So good drugs, yes. Bad drugs, no, is what Lanius interpreted that as.
I mean, there's a lot more to that, but okay.
Okay.
I mean, if
let's give it over to Myta.
Yeah, I would say that generally I would be opposed to the decriminalization of basically all drugs. I have openly stated that I would be in favor of decriminalization of naturalized drugs, things like marijuana, mushrooms, etc., which
Nice.
aren't mass produced and don't have drastic side effects on the body as like synthetic drugs do. But I will say I don't envy Anokay's position based on the questions I'm about to ask. But how you would regulate that? Well, I don't advocate for decriminalizing it at all because I think that there are a lot of problems you run into with really wacky laws. So if you decriminalize the ability to use these drugs but not distribute them, how do you determine whether or not someone is in possession with intent to distribute? This is a law that is commonly abused currently all throughout the United States, and it is prone to the same level of abuse under the system that is advocated for through decriminalization. And it also touches on a lot of laws that we have within the United States that determine whether or not use cases are appropriate, such as but not limited to driving while under the influence of certain drugs. Obviously, if Anokay believes the position that the drug does not actually count as a charge, then you get nothing for simply driving while under the influence of drugs because you are simply driving. So when you have decriminalization of drugs and other things like that, you run into some wacky laws, such as, but not limited to, the ones that I just proposed. But I would never advocate for a system where someone is allowed to get a license to deal specific drugs because I think you run into the same problems that we currently have within our system, where we have found counterfeit drugs being pushed into the official drug lines that are being proposed that or sorry not that are being proposed as safe and are being sold as safe by our current established legal drug dealers that are in fact not safe at all. And I think this would only be exacerbated by interpersonal drug dealers who either produced or distributed their own drugs.
Okay, so you guys want to add anything onto that?
I
We
just want
are
to clarify that driving under the influence is illegal for even legal substances like weed and alcohol. So I hold that position for all drugs, obviously, but also for possession. They was talking about it actually isn't as hard as he's saying. I mean, in some places they might have difficulty for it, but specifically if where I live, you're not going to get arrested for a possession of a certain under a certain amount, because over a certain amount is clearly intent to sell. You're not fucking rolling up with trucks filled with fucking bricks of cocaine just to do recreational use. Obviously, as well as if you have the means of production, like your house is a fucking meth lab, you're obviously fucking creating for production instead of use. Same with like they do this with pot plants as well. I know, where it's like, all right, you can grow a certain amount for yourself, but over a certain amount is clearly not for self, because like there's no way to like mass sell um pot with the amount that you're allowed to like grow for personal use and stuff like that. So there, again, this just shows how malleable these laws can be and will be if you're just willing to work with it. And while there is like problems with our supply chain, with like sometimes things getting tainted in, like as he's mentioned, I would say that it's a lot safer to have the regulations and hand on the wheel that we do, and that sometimes shit's gonna happen, but that's a lot better than the approach we have now. So just don't let don't let good be the enemy, or don't let great be the enemy of good, right?
okay, Myta.
But I don't have much.
Yeah,
other to say.
Myta. We do have a request from the judges that you back up your claim of fentanyl being dumped into, or like whatever, offloaded
Hello?
into. Oh wait, am I muted?
Myta?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm muted. Never mind.
yeah.
I was talking to
Yeah,
myself.
I was waiting for Voss.
Yeah, I was talking to myself. Okay, so essentially, we have a request from the judges. This is relating to Myta and his claim about fentanyl being offloaded into Mexico after the illegalization of the drug. Do you have any sources? They're requesting a source. Now, obviously, by default, the judges should just like take that as a note that there was no source provided and judge it accordingly, but we're giving you a chance. They want to give you a chance of like providing a source. They, by a majority vote, they all want some type of. Do you have any way of proving that occurred?
Yep, I can look this up. You're just gonna need me to, you're gonna need to give me a moment to find a reputable source.
Okay. Anokay, how you doing, brother?
Doing all right.
Yeah, you doing all right? You chilling? Bing chilling?
Bing chilling.
Yeah, you feeling confident, are you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I am coming in a little bit at a disadvantage. I got to acknowledge that because it's last moment. But I think for last moment and not being able to, put together something for this, I think I'm doing pretty good.
All right.
And while, Myta's like a fucking great opponent to always, go against. He's a smart dude. He's not fucking stupid. He has legitimate concerns. He's not like pulling any bullshit, right? He has legitimate concerns. I just think that he's literally letting the idea of that we can just crack down on this or that there's a magical third solution get in the way of how obviously valuable the system is to work in favor of being able to actually treat this problem. Might not fucking fix the problem, but anything that's progress to me right now is better than the situation that we're in. And I've literally heard 0 people provide a solution that hasn't been tried already that works outside of the rehabilitation that I've been talking about.
Okay. Well, this is off the record, by the way, judges. If any of you unhinged motherfuckers are noting anything down because you like his opinions on the matter, no, you're not allowed to do that. This is off the record. We're just waiting for Myta to come back with his source, which was requested by both of you. So this is off the record. You are not noting down any internal biases that you have. Thank you, judges. Just noting that. Yeah, Anokay is very good when he's a very he gives off vibes of a very courteous and he has a good heart. Yeah, he has a good heart. But no, you shouldn't give people points just because I just gave you -20. You're not rating me, Captain. I'm not a debater. I am the host. That's what I do. / moderator, but I'm a pretty bad moderator, let's be honest. But yeah, at least I do host, so that's my fallback. The CCP rates everyone. Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ. Oh, like we gave fentanyl to the Mexican government?
Well, we didn't really give it. We tried to offload it, and we ended up selling it to drug cartels. It wasn't the Mexican government themselves. So the drug cartels, specifically La Sinaloa, talk heavily about the production of fentanyl, and they've had massive fentanyl raids where we can't necessarily prove where all of the fentanyl came from, but we do know that the United States government does sell to La Sinaloa, specifically drugs and arms. These are well established within the community, but the Mexican government denies it. So I guess there's going to be a little bit of give and take here as to what you believe, but I can link you a source from the Associated Press that talks about the seizing of fentanyl pills that were both distributed and produced within Mexico to come across the border in the United States, as well as the Mexican government denying the production and use of all fentanyl pills within Mexico, saying that it's all propaganda. And
all right, just post it in
chat right now.
Post it in chat. Judges, just open your chat. It's in the same channel that we are in now. It's under the bubble. Just then go and reference it to it.
If you are interested, here's a link to the fentanyl ban when it was first proposed in the United States as well, directly from the Department of Justice.
Okay, well, there you go, judges. Hope you're happy. All right. I'm going to let you guys take it away, discuss any other disagreements that you potentially have, and then in like 15 minutes or so, we're going to move over to timed questions. So, floor is yours.
Well, I'm ready for timed questions if you are.
Myta?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, awesome. All right, so timed questions. Here we go. This is from Grand Designs. Relating to, wait a minute, let me just pull this up. Where the fuck are they? All right. So the first question is, I think you guys slightly addressed this, but if not, just go ahead briefly and let us know about it. How about COVID times impacting drug death increase? You both acknowledge that was you already addressed
that was
it.
the
Yeah.
case. Yes,
Okay.
we've addressed that it is artificially inflated. We just never came to a consensus on the extent.
Okay, I will go and reject and refund your points for that one, Grand Designs. So because they already addressed it prior to us asking it. The next one is from again Grand Designs. Decriminalization leads to less police violence and less police involvement in interactions that can lead to deadly consequences for drug users. This feels like a claim. Okay. Income of drug users is less affected by interaction with justice system. What do you think about this?
Anokay, you want to touch on that one? I really don't know how I would go about answering that because I don't think there's ever been any study or anything done to determine that.
I think it's logical to assume, right? Like if we're just gonna like I haven't looked at studies in that either. It's a very hyper specific point, but like if we want to like logically like roll this out, all right? So you have police interact with people, all right? And then by virtue of interacting with people and by virtue that people are not the nobody's fucking pure minded, you're going to have X amount of cops that handle situation bad and end up committing acts of violence against people, right? There's always going to be that number, right? No matter how many good cops there are, there's always going to be some bad cops, right? So it makes sense that by lowering the chance of cops interacting with people, you're going to get less violent interactions. So yes, you can make an argument that decriminalization will mean less police violence to some extent. To what extent, I have fucking no idea, right? The number is non-zero. That's all I can fucking give on that, right? Just by pure logicking it out, right?
Okay.
Yeah. I would just say that like it might lead to less police violence, but I think this sort of it doesn't look at the bigger problem, right? Like we know in the United States, like according to crime statistics, like there are certain demographics in the United States, et cetera, that are more likely to be falsely like pulled over or falsely charged on certain things. And these specific demographics are more likely to be involved in violent altercations with police. So I don't necessarily think the police need a reason in a lot of circumstance to pull someone over or to have an interaction with them. They can just do it of their own volition or free will. And I don't necessarily think that like it would be that drastic. It might lead to like a 0.5 or 1% reduction, but I don't think it'll be like big in the long term.
Okay, and by the way, just for the judges, if you were curious, yes, you are going to be adding and removing points for their answers to this and how they engage with each other, all right? Just so you know, that's the whole point of these questions. Okay, next question. Does abstinence only ever work? This is coming from Ponder. Yeah, okay, yeah.
Abstinence only.
Abstinence, yeah, like essentially like you might want to take drugs, but you just refrain from doing so. Does that ever work? Like, is there a way to like avoid that from happening?
I mean, abstinence is obviously the best way to not get involved
just
with
abstaining
drugs.
from doing drugs is like the best way to not do drugs, obviously. But like, I don't think that
people
the
are gonna
average
do
person
it.
has. Yeah, the average person doesn't have the self-control to do it.
Exactly. So
like this is why I stated previously, the drug culture in the United States is probably the biggest problem in and of itself. Not the drugs, not the means of getting the drugs, not the drugs and how dangerous they are, but the culture around it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, it seems like both competitors agree with each other about that one. And then we've got another two left. Okay, so from Nespa. In France, we do not have a problem of a high price of medicine for most issues. France has a policy to use generic medicine and tries to order in bulk for the whole country. This allows to get the right molecules for a lower price. Don't know what that is. Having a centralized system to order medicine can be beneficial for US and all parties. Okay. Why this issue is not a problem raised? Okay, that's a question. For example, a shot of insulin is like $3. Basic medicine is often $3 the whole box. So he's saying that the price for the medicine in America, okay, so Nespa has a problem with inflation. Okay, but apart from that, all prices from Big Pharma, it seems like, right, guys? So yeah, you can engage with that one. Don't know. The questions seem like why is this issue not a problem? I don't know how this is relative to the conversation being had, but take it away, debaters.
Anokay, you want to go first, or?
Yeah,
I
I'll let
feel
you
like we're
start
just
on
gonna
that.
agree on this because, like,
Yeah,
me and
yeah.
Anokay have had a similar conversation to this prior, where we both agree that like a less privatized healthcare system in the United States is the way to go. Either a single payer funded or a taxpayer funded medical care system would be better than what we have now, because the privatization of healthcare in the United States is, as we've both agreed, a racketeering scheme, and it is owned by corporate monopolies which artificially inflate prices to the utmost extent to drive up their profit margins, and something needs to be done to undermine it. I don't necessarily know how that affects like rehabilitation programs or the price of drugs within the United States, but I would imagine there would be some sort of causal link there. The only problem is it would need to be means tested before I made any claim as to what would or wouldn't happen in this case.
And Anokay agrees with that one.
Yes.
Okay, so judges, if you are judging this, you can't give more or less points for either one because they both agree equally. It's irrelevant that obviously Myta explained it and is a very articulate person. Okay, and last but not least of all questions. If new forms, this is coming from Lanius, if new forms of traditionally syringe-related drugs, would it be useful to mandate these being the only accessible forms of use in order to drastically reduce dirty needles ending up literally streets, parks, etc., ending up littering streets, parks, etc. Question.
Yeah, as I said to him, I was like, yeah, I mean, if we can prevent it with other forms of like, hey, listen, if we're gonna legalize this, and there's like, let's say a syringe version or a
So we're changing the form
I
of the
don't know.
drug from a liquid in a syringe to a solid, like a tablet or something. Is that my?
Or other type of there's multiple ways to take multiple forms of
Yeah.
drugs. So he's asking, if there was like for some of these a legal. I'm guessing he's gonna just refer to heroin here. Let's just go
Yeah.
like fucking heroin.
Yeah.
And if you look at heroin, actually, it's a lot better than some other drugs that are looking at being legalized, which is kind of fucking wild. But and it was a hard pill for me to swallow because I'm not too much of a fan of heroin. But yeah, I think like, dude, if you can combat the spreading of needles by having other methods of taking it, yeah, I think that's something that should definitely be looked at and tested in. And that's my whole point here is that we need to take a health look at this because this is a health crisis, right? I mean, part of it is a health crisis. There's 2 points. You have the victims who are being peddled this stuff and are addicted. That's the health crisis, and then the crime crisis are the fucking cartels and stuff like that were built up by the fucking US's war on the drugs. All right. So I'd say this health approach allows for malleable changes such as this. Should it be mandatory?
Yeah, that's the question.
I couldn't say that until we have the studies. That's the thing, is that I'm not a health expert in this particular field, but I've researched it to come to the opinions I have now. What I would say is that I think that it's an interesting idea that you just threw at me now, and that I am very down for it. And I think that people should look into it and look at testing it as being a mandatory way, and that if it yields really good results and works, fucking roll with it. If it doesn't, we got to change and find something else that works.
Okay. Myta, you want to touch on that?
Yeah, I would say that like I think that we are constantly evolving and changing the way we do drugs. We just recently seen a bill passed here in the United States where Joe Biden signed an initiative to allow things like crack pipes, needles, and bongs to be distributed to certain drug rehabilitation facilities to allow people to get the means to be able to cleanly do these drugs. But I think that that's independent of the drugs, because the problems that are caused by these dirty needles and dirty crack pipes, etc., are things that are involving specifically sexually transmitted disease and not necessarily have anything to do with the drugs themselves. I think that it doesn't matter how healthy of a form you find to get the drugs into your body, the drugs themselves, in a lot of cases with synthetic drugs, are what are causing damage to your body. Like, you can smoke it, you can snort it, you can inject it, you can give yourself a crack enema, it doesn't matter. You're still going to have the negative repercussions of all of the side effects of taking a synthetic drug and putting it into your body. So I think while
Well,
it might mitigate the amount of STDs or otherwise superficial harm being done, I think that the issue is in a lot of cases with the drugs themselves.
I agree with you here, but I think you're missing the point of the question there, Myta. I think the question is not about the harm reduction to yourself, but the harm reduction to others. The reason that we make things illegal is not because of the harm that it does to yourself. If that was the case, we'd make so many other fucking things illegal, right? It's the harm that it does to society and others. So he's pointing out that with certain drugs, the needle use can provide a harm in the littering of them to others, like, you know, little girls that fucking, or boys that fucking might pick it up and stab themselves, you know, the dirty needles being able to spread the STDs, as you talked about. So I think he's just more or less tackling it of, okay, if we are going to take this health initiative approach, should we take steps like this to mitigate the effects that it has on other people? And I think that's an absolute must to look into.
Yeah, but like this is the sort of problem that I have with it is you can't approach it from that scenario because you're talking about irresponsible behaviors for the tool used to take the drugs. Someone putting a crack pipe in their mouth and then throwing it on a beach somewhere and having a kid pick it up and be like, "Oh, look, I'm just like the people in the park," and put it in their mouth, they might get herpes from that. There's circumstances where if you have anything that's other than a syringe, you could still spread STDs or other diseases through any means that you use to like consume the drug. It doesn't necessarily have to be a needle or a pipe, etc. And this is why I say that it's just as problematic due to the irresponsible drug users, not necessarily the means they use to do it themselves.
Okay.
Yeah, don't use secondhand crack enemas. That's the moral of the story.
What are that? What is that? Crack enemas? What, the bottles,
Don't
the little
Google
In
pipe?
the ass.
Okay.
It's in the ass.
In the ass? Ugh.
Yeah.
No points. Okay. Right. Ask mine. It's for the. It'll be pounds were refunded. Oh, for God's sake. No, we've already gone past it. We've already bothered them enough. I will refund your points, Grand Design. Sorry, man. We've already asked like a bunch of questions to the fucking debaters. It's all right. Right. Thank you guys for engaging. I was going to ask my own personal question, but we've already been doing this for 2 hours now, so I feel like it's time to call it. All right. Thank you guys for participating. Thank you to all the judges and the debaters and everybody involved. I'm going to bring the judges in now, and what I want you guys to do is to add the bonus points on to whoever you feel represented their side the best. So go ahead and do that now. So you're going to give 2 points to either Anokay or to Myta, depending on who you feel represented their overall position the best. Okay, so each one of you 2 points to either one of them. All right, now I'm going to unmute you all. Nobody say anything until I'm going to call you each one by one. And you're going to give us your score. You're going to give us the pro position. So that would be for Anokay. And always when you're giving me the first score, it's going to be for Anokay. The second score will be for Myta. And yeah, then we'll do you guys one by one and we will figure out who the winner is. So you're all unmuted now. I will call you out one by one. All right, 1 second. Let me get my...
I'm going to need a second to count, though.
You're going to need a second account? What does that mean?
What do you mean? What did it mean?
Jesus.
Horseradish needs to use all his fingers and toes to add up the scores. Hold on a sec.
Wow.
I fucking hate that you're right. I'm literally using my fingers, you asshole. Fuck you.
Wow. Jesus.
I'm sorry, I'm kidding. I love you.
I'll give you guys a minute. I'll go to the toilet real fast and I'll be right back.
I bet he's going to do a crack enema.
Based.
See, our culture, you gave him the idea, and now he's running with it.
Green guy, weren't you in the chat with me yesterday? What the fuck? Are you changing your name like every day?
No, Let's Chief is always Let's Chief.
Oh, okay.
He
well,
just has-
no,
he
that's
has
that's a
evil
new guy. That's a new guy. Okay, I'm
This
sorry.
is an FNG.
There's a guy
he's
yesterday
by like a day, but hang on,
There's
I'm
a
using
guy
my
that
fucking
sounded like you.
fingers. 2, 3, 4, 6.
Everyone shout out random numbers.
Fuck you.
17, 5,
12, 13,
38.
21.
Donnie line, 19.
While we're on a brief pause, I'll just say great job, both of you.
Yes,
Thank
I
you.
cheers. Agree.
That was good. No good, refreshing. No real like bad faith moments. So yeah, it was enjoyable.
Oh yeah, Myta and I are always like that. Like even from our first conversation, like it's pretty good.
There was
What?
literally one moment of ad hom where you called him a slippery something or rather.
No. That
was
wasn't towards.
it's
wait,
such
wait,
a
wait, wait.
it's. Oh,
Let me
was
clarify.
it
That
not?
wasn't toward. That was towards the boss.
Yeah,
Not
yeah,
Myta.
yeah.
Oh well, fuck! I gotta change my score then. Hang on, my bad.
And anytime Anokay is saying anything bad about a human being, it's always relating to me because I go at him all the time
Yeah,
and call
that
him a
was
bunch
just-
of different things, and he's just giving me a taste of my own medicine. So I don't really take it personally. The
Yeah,
total is 3.
Just to clarify, that slippery snake that was towards the boss, not Myta.
Yeah.
Clarified and appreciated.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. Is there any of you who's ready now?
I'm done with my math. Yes, sir.
You're done with your math. Okay, go ahead, horseradish. Give me your score. So first for Anokay and then for Myta.
Anokay 18, Myta 15.
Okay. Who is next? Any one of you have a flow? You can go if you want.
Holy shit. 18 and 15.
Yeah, you don't
What
get to
the heck?
criticize other judges' scores. Go ahead and give us your score.
54 and 60.
Okay, whoa.
Holy shit!
Whoa, Jesus.
Wait,
We
was that
apparently may have done this differently, but that's okay.
54 and
I mean,
60.
it's almost
wait.
the same. It's just different scaling.
Yeah.
54 and
exactly.
60, did you say?
Wait, we
Yes.
can just divide this. They're both
22.
divisible.
I
by a
know,
number.
don't confuse me, guys. 22, 72.
He's using
Okay.
his fingers and toes
All
too.
right. We're still very close.
so much better.
It's still very close. Okay, here we go. And the last but not least.
So Anokay life, because I hate Anokay, it got 19.
19.
And Myta 17.
Whoa, what does that add up to? I feel. Oh, bro.
That's a tie.
No, it's not.
Isn't it?
No, it's 91-92 to Myta.
Wow.
What the actual fuck? Wait a minute. Wait, repeat. Okay, so we've got 1-1.
Yep.
Who was the last one for? So who did what you said? What was the score again? Give me just the score.
For
Chief.
me,
Yeah.
19, 17.
Oh no. Oh, okay. No, wait. Why am I saying no? Holy shit. Okay, but even though it's Myta has more of a
Because
score, it's a split decision and it goes to Anokay. Because
Ooh, why is
two
that?
judges
Controversial.
two judges voted for Anokay and one judge gave a higher score for Myta. So even though Myta has a greater score,
Oh, this is like some electoral college shit.
It's
No.
like one of those boxing matches that everyone's going to be mad about.
yeah, this is
Yeah.
this is the
No,
yeah.
It was a
Myta
hell of
got
a battle,
Al
boys.
Gored.
Look,
You got
that's
Al
the-
Gored, Myta.
Yeah,
It'd be
he,
like that sometimes.
yeah. It is very, very close, but it is 2-1, and we do rank things according to the boxing way, which is the split and the split decision. Yeah, pretty much. 91-92. There you go. All right. Damn. Holy shit. Okay, so that's 30. What is that? That's 30. I think a lot of people are not going to be. Dang. People are already pissed off about that. Holy shit. Okay. Yep. 91-92. It's 2-1. So by split decision, we have our final victor. It is Anokay. So congratulations, Anokay. You are the victor of today's debate. So yes, ladies and gentlemen, drugs should be decriminalized. There you go. Finally settled.
It's so biased.
What do you mean bias? There is no bias. It's,
Yeah. You just like drugs.
Yeah, I do like
Okay,
drugs.
so to counter Everflow really quick,
Yeah.
you must have bought everything everyone said, hook, line, and sinker, for you to give 3 points for literally every point out there. That's crazy.
Yeah, true story. Because for what it's worth, and I was actually like, you can literally watch me scoring this shit in
Yeah.
real time. I was basically every time somebody would say something that was an up, I gave them a plus, and every time somebody said something that was a down, I gave them a negative. And so basically, I can then go back and just count up my ups and downs and be able to go based on the balance from it. So,
Well, I don't do any downs except like bad faith.
gotcha. Well, yeah, no, well, and that was so there were I can go through a couple of them, but they were basically like either facts that were not relevant or were factually incorrect. And then more importantly, it would also go like a two-way where if the other person would acknowledge, like if for instance Myta said something that wasn't true, and then Anokay said, "Hey, what about this thing that you said that wasn't true?" Myta got a down one and Anokay got a plus one. You see what I'm saying? So like it kind of there was a bunch of ups and downs, and so like if I was to just take away like yeah, so I it was just an interesting difference, but we came up with close to the same results.
Let's just pretend like I'm European and we work in the metric system. So like our increments are a bit smaller than inches.
It's not all that's smaller than inches.
I heard that about you.
Wait, no, actually, that is false information according to your information. Americans have some of the, wait, sorry, wait, I was about to lie there, wasn't
No,
I?
an inch is great. What?
I've actually researched this, believe it or not.
I know where he was going.
Yeah,
with this.
yeah. Americans don't actually, on average, have big penises, by the way, just telling you
What the
guys.
fuck?
They really don't. I know what you guys were saying. I know what you guys were talking about. It's just I'm saying the thing that nobody was mentioning. Yeah. It's not the only thing that Europeans having smaller. Yeah. Okay.
Apparently, my chat knows you and Myta from an incest conversation that you guys quote unquote went into too much detail about.
That definitely didn't happen.
That happened.
Yeah, that definitely didn't happen. That was a